Alright, number 10, where it all began. We have to at least begin at the beginning. Slender Man first started back in 2009 when it made its first appearance on a website called Something Awful on June 10th of that year. It was posted by Eric Knudsen, 28 at the time, who went by the internet name of Victor Surge. It was supposed to be yet another entry into a paranormal image Photoshop contest, but no one expected what happened next. According to Eric, Slender Man was exactly that, a tall, thin, white-faced man with no facial features in a black suit. It had long arms that Knudsen said it would use to stalk young people and torment them with mind games. Soon, images and stories of Slender Man swept the internet, even earning deadly and dedicated followers, which we will discuss in detail later. As a result, many believe that Slender Man has actually been thought into existence through collective consciousness, that it has become a tulpa. A tulpa is an entity that is created in the mind and acts independently and parallel to your own consciousness. They are sentient beings who live in your head, but also live in the real world at the same time. So, while the initial beginning of Slender Man is fictional, there is just no guarantee that it remains that way. After all, as Dumbledore said, to make an entirely unrelated pop culture reference, just because it's happening in your head, why on earth should that mean that it is not real? Number 9. The Shadow Man. This first victim reports having been tormented by Slender Man his entire life and referred to him first as the Shadow Man. Many people who experience night terrors report seeing a tall, lanky shadow figure that torments them while in sleep paralysis. This guy first saw him when he was just 8 years old. While getting up to go to the washroom, they saw a tall, shadowy figure standing in the hallway. He reached out and beckoned to him with long, slender fingers. At some point, he worked up the courage to turn on the light, and the figure disappeared. 4 years later, it appeared again on his uncle's farm, standing in the highest window at the top of the building of the old barn, staring right at him. Then 2 years later after that, he appeared again, this time a lot closer. By this point, this person had developed sleep paralysis and would happen fairly often. As they were about to drift off to sleep, there he stood at the end of his bed. They couldn't move or scream, and the figure just stood there watching him, waiting for something, until finally he burst up from the bed and Slender Man disappeared. But the sense that someone was watching him still remained and never went away. Number 8. Trampoline. I mentioned previously that Slender Man became a kind of internet meme contest, but just how Slender Man became such a prolific urban legend remains unknown. Perhaps it's because of innocent sightings like this that make a more sinister explanation arise. Check out this clip. I think what freaks me out about this video the most is how horror film-esque it is and how mundane. It was just a kid wanting to record his badass trampoline skills, but what he wouldn't have noticed while he was filming was the presence of something watching him. Considering the fanaticism around Slender Man, it is possible that predators could assume its identity to carry out evil deeds. I don't know, but I hope he's safe and that who or whatever that was never seen again. Number 7. 7-Eleven. Apparently Slender Man loves a good Slurpee. This next story comes from a young woman from Oklahoma City. She was 15 years old at the time when her and her friend made a typical visit to 7-Eleven. Next to the convenience store there was a park with all of these weird statues. It was around 12:30 a.m. and usually it's an uneventful walk, but this time they saw an extremely tall figure, as tall as the branches in the trees nearby. It was dressed in black and extremely pale, sounds like Slender Man. Attempting to show no fear in the face of potential danger, she shouted at the person to see if she'd get a response, but to no avail. It just stood there, staring at them. I hate that. Needless to say, they booked it and referred to the being as Voldemort because that's kind of what it looked like. But then, years later, her friend informed her of the tales of Slender Man, and after seeing a picture, she realized that's exactly what it looked like. Imagine? No thank you. Number 6. A cemetery sighting. This next story predates the whole Slender Man launch as well. This Reddit user reports a story that happened in her hometown before Slender Man was even launched. Reports of kids seeing a tall man in a suit walking around was already the stuff of legend where she lived. Her friend's older sister was skateboarding home one night and she had to pass the cemetery. Of course there's a cemetery. Of course there is. As she went by, she kept seeing tall shadows was following her, and she initially just like wrote it off as a weird reflection of the light, you know, as you would. But then when she got home, she saw a creepy looking old man wearing a black suit standing in her backyard. She ran inside and looked out the window, but he had moved. He was already across the street under the trees, again, still looking at her. Stories like this were pretty common in her neighborhood, but it wasn't until the Slender Man story actually launched in 2009 that people actually got really scared. If stories like this actually exist and remain to be true, then here's my question. Since the way he tortures his victims is through mental manipulation, who is to say that the image of Slender Man circulating is a result of the creature's own grand plan? Number 5. Alone in the Forest. This next story comes from Zach, who lives in Texas. This one creeps me out because it reminds me of the stories kids at school used to tell about the forest behind my school. While Zach was growing up, there was a big patch of forest behind his house. He used to play there all the time, but one evening made him question ever going back. Something was off about that evening, and so he began looking around. Off in the distance he saw a figure just standing there. It was impossibly tall, dark, with a featureless face, but somehow he knew he was staring right at him. Like a smart lad, everything inside him told him to run, and so he did. Follow your instincts, kids, okay? He was about a 7-minute run to his backyard, so he started sprinting, but no matter how fast he ran or where he went, the creature was always the same distance behind him. When he finally made it to the other side, he turned around and saw the creature stopped. He never saw the creature again, but years later, he started hearing about Slender Man and knew that's what he had seen. Number 4. Aaron Campbell. Aaron Campbell was a twisted young man obsessed with a wide variety of violent video games and just gore in general. He started out as they all do, by taking the lives of animals in vicious ways for pleasure. So when Aaron took the life of Alicia MacPhail on the island of Bute in Scotland, though shocked and horrified, no one could say they were surprised that Aaron was the perpetrator. Campbell was obsessed with anything that had to do with violence and was especially fascinated by Slender Man. This was just one of his fixations, and reportedly practiced voodoo while attempting to be YouTube famous. But his obsession with Slender Man finally became a reality. Alicia's death was gruesome to say the least, inhumane beyond belief. Thankfully, Aaron now sits behind bars for a minimum of 27 years, but honestly, hopefully forever. Number 3. House on Fire. This next one was one of 3 crimes inspired by Slender Man and goes to show how dangerous obsession can be. In 2014, Lily Marie Hartwell walked to a park in the middle of the night. She carried with her a backpack full of knives, lighters, flashlights, cookies, and some water. Lily had just carried out an act brought on by an obsession with the tale of Slender Man. Unbeknownst to her mother and brother who were sleeping at home, she had just set her house on fire. Thankfully, the two escaped the fire with no mortal injuries, but their entire home fell to ash. According to police accounts, Lily confessed to having been obsessed with the creepypasta story of Slender Man. She tracked down story after story about the creature and kept journal entries mentioning murder and death. One particular entry is chilling to read, especially after such a horrific event. It reads, and I quote, "This keeps up, there will be no safety in this house," unquote. Lily was charged with arson and 2 attempted homicides. Weirdly though, Lily sent a text to her mom after the fact that read, "I'm so sorry mom, I don't know why I did it. Did any of you get hurt?" Like she was actually concerned. So it kind of goes to show that she was in a weird space and maybe she snapped out of it. Could it have been Slender Man? We don't know. Number 2. White Mask. One of the key tropes of Slender Man that I mentioned previously is his ability to mentally torture its victims. So could that be the reason as to this next story? In 2014 in Cincinnati, Ohio, a mother who chose to remain nameless along with her daughter was returning home from work. Her daughter was waiting for her silently in the kitchen, wearing all black clothing and a white mask. Already we know who she's trying to imitate, and given the daughter's reported obsession with Slender Man, you get the idea. But next, the unimaginable happened. The daughter attempted to stab her own mother in the chest. The mother was able to thwart the attack, earning only minor defensive wounds. Apparently, her daughter had a history with mental illness and Slender Man had become an obsession of hers. She had drawings, diary entries, and references to killing, and even made a whole world dedicated to the creature on Minecraft. The girl's fascination inspired her attack on her mother, but there was something very off with her daughter, stating to police, and I quote, "She was someone else during the attack." Number 1, last but not least, fatal followers. We had the infamous Slender Man trial. Morgan Geyser and her friend Anissa Vire were fanatic believers in a legend of Slender Man, and the consequences were almost deadly. In May of 2014 in Wisconsin, the girls made an attempt to show their dedication to this false idol by offering up a sacrifice. Their victim of choice was Peyton Leutner, one of their classmates. The two girls lured Peyton to a slumber party at their house and decided to play a game of hide and seek in the forest. During the game, the two girls got knives, pinned her down, and left 19 wounds and hit 2 major arteries. They fled the scene of the crime, and Peyton, being the utter badass that she is, dragged herself to a nearby road where she was saved by a nearby biker. Peyton lived to tell the tale, thankfully, and both Anissa and Morgan have been diagnosed with childhood onset schizophrenia. Morgan was charged with first-degree intentional homicide, which moved it to an adult court. Geyser was ordered to spend 40 years in a mental health institution, and Anissa was committed to a mental health facility for 25 years.
And we're kicking off this list with The Man in the Woods by Chad Damasi. The story goes a little something like this. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary during the first 4 hours of Chad's fire lookout night shift. Around 2:15 a.m. caught the sound of footsteps, but he assumed it was just a passing deer. He grabbed his binoculars to scan the area, and the noises compelled him to look down, where he noticed a man near the base of the tower. Thinking the man was a lost camper, common occurrence in those parts, Chad decided to offer help. Engaging in a casual conversation, he pointed the man towards the nearest campsite. The man went on his way. Content, Chad returned to his post, opened the mini fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and relaxed while appreciating the serene view of the woods. However, the calmness abruptly shattered after approximately 20 minutes. Once again, the disconcerting sound of movement reached Chad's ears. With binoculars in hand, he searched and saw the same man below, calling out to him. Yielding no response, the man seemed completely oblivious. Filled with unease, Chad descended the stairs, shouting for the man's attention. As his foot touched the final step, the man turned to face him, but to Chad's horror, the man's visage was a blank canvas skin, emanating a chilling, muffled scream. The man's eyes locked with Chad's. Frantically, Chad sprinted back upstairs, leaping multiple stairs at a time into the tower. He hurriedly tried to barricade the large windows while the man ascended with deliberate, thunderous steps, his muffled scream persisting. After some time, the stomping ceased, leaving Chad uncertain of the man's whereabouts. Gazing out the window, he found no trace of the intruder on the balcony. Refusing to succumb to his fear, Chad unsheathed his hunting knife, flung open the door, and dashed around the balcony, but his search yielded nothing. Hastening back inside, he locked the door. His heart was pounding. He reached for the radio to contact the other park ranger. He glanced at the window, and there, standing outside, was the faceless man. Paralyzed, Chad suddenly realized, even worse, he was actually seeing the man's reflection. Number 9, The Light Isn't Safe Anymore by Firelight Wood Watcher. This story is about a man working in a fire watchtower with his pet dog Sam. The storyteller describes unusual things starting to happen, like noticing that the forest would become eerily quiet at night. They'd also find mysterious tracks in the dirt in the mornings. One night, he heard a strange yelp from the forest. It sounded almost like a coyote or a wolf, but deeper. There was something off about it, and his dog Sam was just frozen in place, staring at the door. The watchman grabbed his rifle and went out to investigate. What he saw chilled him to the bone. Strange figures emanating bright light, almost like fireflies, began coming out of the tree line. They all surrounded the outhouse below, dragging their feet almost like zombies. They looked almost human, except extremely pale and with slash wounds that shot out rays of light from within their bodies. One of the creatures looked up at the watchman. It had large, pure black eyes. It grinned at him, when suddenly the light from the outhouse went out and the strange creatures suddenly vanished. This next story was posted to Reddit by Another Pen. It's called I Work in a Fire Watchtower and the Mist is Coming. John had begun volunteering at a fire watch tower, but was out on a walk when he noticed storm clouds rolling in. The weather was predicted to be completely clear, so he was pretty confused and started making his way back to the tower to call it in. Soon he became enveloped in a strange fog though, and John noticed a small fire, and beside the fire was a man sitting on a log. John made his way over to the man, who referred to him by name. John was obviously pretty uneasy about about this, especially when the man told him things about himself that no stranger could possibly have known, like how he'd been diagnosed with lung cancer before coming to the fire tower to spend the last remaining days of his life. Next on the list we have Fire Lookout here. Here's some advice. This was posted to Reddit by user Copper Tucker. It describes advice that a fire lookout has for dealing with a strange creature that stalks the forest. First of all, treat the forest as if it's someone else's home you're visiting. Don't carve your name into trees. Do not ever cut a tree down. Don't overfish. Always put your fire out. If you're camping overnight in the woods, don't set up camp in large clearings. If it sees you, it may not like you. If you begin working in the lookout tower and happen to see the large creature, just let it pass. Don't stare at it. We'll know if you're staring at it. If you see the giant bone-colored oblong shape that is believed to be its face, just look away. Staring at it could mean your death. And lastly, know that you are going to see it. It'll look like a tree, but not a tree. Taller than anything with that empty shape for a face. Its roots are deep and long. It's old. We all know it. You'll know it too. When you see it, you must look at the ground, bow your head, saying that you're sorry for bothering it. Maybe it will leave you alone. This next story is brought to us by an unknown author, simply titled Something in the Woods. As I settled down into my post in the Firewatch Tower, the night stretched out before me, engulfing the forest in a shroud of darkness. Alone and vigilant, I scanned the horizon, watching for the faintest hint of danger. Hours passed, uneventful and serene, until an unsettling feeling crept into my bones. Faint whispers carried on the wind, echoing through the trees. My pulse began to quicken as shadows danced beyond the tower's windows. A chill slithered down my spine, and then, in the distance, I saw it, a flicker of movement, a silhouette lurking among the trees. Panic seized me as I realized I was being watched. I observed unseen eyes. The whispers grew louder, though, forming in unintelligible words that gnawed at my sanity. Fear consumed me as I realized that in this desolate tower. The following story was posted to Reddit by user Kylex7637. He describes a man waking up in a fire tower he was staying in with his partner when he suddenly woke up in the middle of the night completely alone. He figured his partner had gone to the bathroom, but her boots were still by the door. She wouldn't have climbed all the way down the tower in the middle of winter without putting on her boots. He went down to find her. Before stepping out, I look down and see them, a few perfect sets of footprints, leading out the door to a snow-cleared spot in the railing. Shivering, I walk over, the snow crunching under my feet louder than I feel it should. My hands freezing on the railing, I look down and see her. She's laying on the ground. Not really laying, more like stuck. Time stops, but my heartbeat doesn't. She's not moving, just a perfect silhouette in the fresh snow. I head down the stairs as fast as I can. Fire lookouts always have stairs that feel more like ladders. In a flash, I'm at the bottom, breathless and hotter than I should be in this weather. I got to the hole in the snow where I saw her lifeless body. She's gone. The perfect silhouette remains, but she's gone. Then I see the tracks. In the full moon, I can make out what seems to be large elk prints in the snow coming from the trees to me and back again. I'm sure I can make out the shape of her at the forest edge, or maybe an animal. The antlers are clear as day against the moonlit sky beyond, but it's standing much too tall now. The hair on the back of my neck stands up as I feel warm breathing glide past my ears. Then I hear her like a whisper, calling to me from the balcony, calling me to come back to the fire, back to bed. Her body is still crooked, just like when she was lying in the snow next to where I stand. The snow crunches softly now as I make my way into the trees. The next story was written by Carrie Hammond, who posted to Reddit under the username Search and Rescue Woods. It features multiple stories experienced by a search and rescue officer working in United States parks. One such story goes as follows. I was teamed up with another SAR officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get to where we figured he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevice with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and then when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment and he was just wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. Was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night climbing down the mountain and letting out these horrible muffled screams. That story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there to hear it. Number 3, The Lookout. So this next one is really more of a recommendation than a story itself. This is a short horror film written and directed by Catherine Oostman. It's about a woman working as a fire lookout who wakes up hearing strange noises one night. Someone calls for help over the radio saying that there's something out here. When she goes out to investigate, she encounters that something that I don't want to show here to avoid spoilers, but the cinematography is fantastic here, lots and lots of atmosphere. So if you've been looking for a spooky, foreboding short horror film about a fire watchtower, then give this one a watch. Number 2, Black Eyes. We have another story posted by Reddit user Search and Rescue Woods. In this story, the narrator had been searching for a woman who'd been separated from her hiking group. They managed to find her, and luckily she wasn't injured, but she was in shock. As they were taking her back to base ops, the following happened. She kept looking behind us and asking us why that big man with the black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop, making faces at her. At one point, she stopped, turned around, and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. Finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were within sight of base ops, the woman turns to me and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human could open them. She touches my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's almost hidden under my collar, and no idea how this woman even saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear, and I just about jumped out of my skin. And number 1, we have I Was a Fire Lookout, but I Don't Know What I Saw by Beneficial Scars. A man was working his shift in a fire watch tower as a thunderstorm howled outside. Suddenly he heard a knock on the door, which startled him because he was supposedly all alone in the middle of nowhere. As creeped out as he was, he opened the door slowly, and standing there was a small figure dressed in black, who told the man he was warning him of a fire nearby. The figure spoke with his back to him. The fire watchman had already seen the fire, but it was procedure to wait to call it in until after a storm passes through. The figure said people needed help and told the man to follow him. Suddenly, a flash of lightning lit up the room, revealing that the man had a burnt, disfigured face. The fire watchman yelled out in shock and picked up the phone to call for help. The dispatcher picked up, and when the watchman explained the situation, he was simply told, "Do not leave, no matter what. Do not talk to him. Do not look at him. Pretend he is not there." The watchman was confused before the dispatcher continued by saying, "That is not a man."
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the single braid story. The road that runs along the campus of the Chinese University of Hong Kong is referred to as Single Braid Road. and this is the story that gave it that name. On a cold night, a girl with a long braid in her hair went to great lengths in order to sneak into Hong Kong from the mainland with her boyfriend. They boarded a train to head into the city when they saw police on the train checking people's identification. Because she wasn't supposed to be there and had snuck in, she decided the only thing to do would be to try and jump off of the moving train. In a gruesome turn of events, her braid ended up getting stuck in the window and ripped off all of the skin from her scalp and face. The girl stumbled onto the road where she collapsed and died. Throughout all of this, her boyfriend continued on the train, went into the city, got a new job, and pretended like the girl never existed. Flash forward to another night when a male student is walking alone on Single Braid Road when he sees a girl standing in the distance. He calls out to her, but she doesn't respond, so he begins to approach her and can see that she has a long braid in her hair. When he reaches her, he taps her on the shoulder, and when she turns around, he sees that she has no face. Then she just disappears. They say that the ghost has appeared many times since then, but only male students can hear her. I just want it to be known that if I was in her place and a boy did that to me, I would absolutely come back to haunt him and all men for the rest of eternity.
Moving on to number 9, we have Room 111. And if you're liking this video so far, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel because you know what? It really helps us out, so thank you very much. Now, much like most of these stories, this one has evolved over time, so there are 2 versions of the story. The one I'm about to tell you surrounds a very intelligent science undergraduate who thought he discovered how to master time travel. So one night in room 111 of Grace Tian Hall, he wrapped himself up in a mechanism he had created. It was a bunch of wires attached to an alarm clock and a big battery. When the clock's alarm went off, he believed he was going to be able to travel in time. But the experiment went terribly wrong, as you could have imagined, and he ended up being electrocuted to death. His roommate found him laying in bed with a note beside him reading, "I will come back soon." Upon this discovery, the roommate went mad and had to be taken to a mental asylum. And now, no one ever dares to stay in room 111 for the events that happened there.
In our number 8 spot today, we have the story of the hanged ghost. While ghosts are extremely common in Chinese folklore, these ghosts are pretty specific. A hanged ghost is a spirit of someone who is hanged, whether it be from committing or execution, and they haunt the location where they died. While most ghosts are already pretty creepy, the hanged ghosts have quite an appearance. They're said to appear as a corpse with a long red tongue that hangs out of their mouth. The goal of these ghosts is to try and convince anyone they come across to join them in the afterlife.
Making our way down the list, number 7, we have the painted skin. This story has to do with a demon that hides its true gruesome appearance by transforming into other people. So one day this man named Wang runs into this beautiful woman on the street that claims to be homeless. He takes her home and hides her in his house from his wife, and he has an affair with this mystery homeless woman. Well, eventually a priest warns him that there's evil in his house, but he ignores it until one day he looks into his window and sees the woman is actually a green-faced monster with sharp, jagged teeth. She had been wearing a mask made out of human skin. The story basically ends with the guy getting his heart ripped out by the demon, and then the demon transforms into different people to hide his identity. In the climax, the demon shows its true self, and the priest beheads it with his wooden sword. And then Wang's wife just coughs up his heart and puts it back into Wang's chest, and then he's brought back to life. Crazy, I know. Also, what kind of a bedtime story is this, really?
Coming in at number 6, we have the Little Finger story. There was a male university student who often found himself studying in the library late after it had closed. After his study session, he would walk past a park on his way back to his dorm, and he always saw a small little girl sitting on a swing in the park. One day he decided to go and speak to the little girl and check on her. From that night on, every time he passed the park and saw her there, he would stop in and chat with her before returning home. One day he was telling his friends about this little girl, and they asked what she looked like. He described the girl, and his friends told him that she sounded like she looked exactly like a teacher's daughter who had tragically died in a car accident, but that daughter had lost her little finger. The next night, when the man went to go and see the little girl in the park, he couldn't help but ask to see her hands, just to check. She was very reluctant, but he insisted. And when she finally revealed her hands, he saw that she was in fact missing her little finger. Of course this freaked him out, so he ran away in fear. From then on, he never saw the little girl again.
We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Mongolian death worm. The Mongolian death worm is a famous cryptid in China. It's said to lurk in the Gobi Desert and is described as being this giant red type worm creature. It's said to be between 2 to 5 feet long and is as thick as a man's arm. But the creature can grow even bigger than that. As a result of its appearance, it's sometimes called the intestine worm. On top of it all, it can also spray venom at its victims from a far distance. Its acid-like venom is so strong that it can kill a camel or horse. Now, many believe this creature is said to be true and have even gone to the desert in search of it. So far, it has come of nothing, and let's keep it that way.
Moving on down to number 4, today we have the oxtail soup story. There was a young couple who were in medical school together. They lived in the same dorm, but on different floors, and there was a really strict study curfew that left them little to no time to see each other. It's also worth mentioning that this story comes from a time when there were no cell phones, so they couldn't just slide into each other's DMs or have a quick FaceTime in order to catch up. Every night the girl would make oxtail soup, and because her boyfriend lived directly below her, she would send a cup of soup down from her window. They both loved this little tradition that they had set up, and it made them feel close even when they couldn't speak or see each other. One night, the boy received his soup, ate it, and then fell asleep studying. The next day, he had time to go up and see his girlfriend, so he headed to her floor, but he couldn't find her. He ended up asking around and came to find that his girlfriend had actually died a few days before due to a sudden illness. He was, of course, suddenly overwhelmed with grief and the terrible news, but then it quickly hit him. If his girlfriend had died a few days ago, who had given him the soup the night before?
And at number 3, we have the hopping corpse. The Jiangshi, otherwise known as the Chinese zombie or the Chinese hopping vampire or the hopping zombie, is a pretty well-known creature of Chinese folklore. This creature's name translates to rigid bodies or stiff corpse, and it's said to be corpses that have come back to life to kill the living. They are described as having greenish, rotting flesh and move by hopping. You'll know when one's coming if you hear thump, thump, thump. That's the sound of the monster hopping to get you, to suck the soul out of you like a vampire. In order to scare off these creatures, you need to use mirrors because they are scared of their own reflections, and also they don't like the brightness of mirrors. For some reason, a hopping zombie is way scarier to me than one that limps slowly. I don't know what it is about it.
In our number 2 spot today, we have the Lotus Pond story. This story starts off with a young couple who were so in love that they planned to run away together and elope. They made a plan to meet at midnight at the Lotus Pond, and from there they would leave and go start their lives together. When the girl showed up at midnight, she waited for so long, but the boy never showed up. She left the pond and went back into town when she spotted her boyfriend with another woman. She was so heartbroken and upset that she began crying and could not stop. She was so distraught that she went back to the Lotus Pond where they had planned to meet and herself. Months later, another couple had planned to meet at the Lotus Pond. The boy got to the pond early and was waiting for his girlfriend to arrive when he heard a female voice say, "I asked you to meet me at midnight, didn't I?" The boy was really confused because this wasn't the meeting time that him and his partner had discussed, and he responded, "No." All of a sudden, 2 pale white hands reached out of the water and dragged him under the pond, drowning him. Ever since then, it is said that if you are at the Lotus Pond at midnight and you encounter a girl or hear her voice, do not answer her questions or even look at her, or she will get you too.
And in our number 1 spot, we have Bus 375. On midnight of November 14th, 1995, Bus 375, the last bus of the night, pulled into Summer Palace's bus terminal. It was known as the Midnight Bus, or the bus to Fragrant Hills, because that's where the bus was headed. But on this night, the bus disappeared under mysterious circumstances. At the bus terminal, 2 passengers got on, an old man and a young man. While headed to the last stop, the bus driver spotted 3 shadows waving at the side of the road. The bus driver stopped and it was 3 men and he let them on. But something wasn't right about them. and you couldn't see any of their faces. Shortly after the three people got on, the old man picked a fight with the young man, claiming he stole his wallet. The argument got so bad that they got kicked off of the bus. When they got off and the bus zoomed away, the old man was no longer angry, and he told the young man that he had just saved their lives. The three passengers that got on were ghosts. He noticed that they didn't have any feet and that they were floating. The next day, the two learned that bus 375 vanished, only to be found 3 days later at the bottom of a lake. Inside the bus, there were 3 decomposed corpses. Now, some believe that this is a true story, and to this day, it remains an unsolved mystery.
Number 10, subliminal messages. CoComelon has taken the world by surprise. This children's sing-along show, as annoying as it is, it's killing it. It broke Netflix records. It became the most popular program of 2020. Yeah, meanwhile, I was watching Ozark like a fool while the rest of my friends were all on that CoComelon train. Their YouTube channel began much earlier. They began back in 2006, and the show became an empire since. Now they're well off. All those babies have adult money now. And the best part for parents is that their content is of course really suitable for children. But why is this show so addictive? Are there subliminal messages in there? What's so addicting about CoComelon? Well, many believe that mind control is responsible. Yeah, like this stuff. To be fair, these songs are quite catchy, they get stuck in your head. But is this a stairway to heaven type scenario? Like, what are we really hearing backwards? You know what I mean? What happens when I play it in reverse? Yes, no shit. It's like, click the like button. I'm like, what? This guy's weird. While it's great to see your child go from temper tantrum to CoComelon choreography, one has to ask, what is this doing to a young mind? What are the long-term effects here? I think the show is just full of bangers, personally, but let's continue with some other theories and see how we feel at the end about this CoComelon show, demonic show. Number 9, JJ. Okay, so there's a character named JJ the baby, except JJ the baby talks like a grown man, and it's quite confusing for everyone. Well, not really. He talks like a 9-year-old, but either way, that's still confusing, right? This baby's walking around paying bills like he's an adult. He's singing, he's dancing. Again, he knows TikTok choreography. This man's doing choreo better than the other babies. So much so that Reddit users have actually expressed their own theories on this Benjamin Button baby scenario. Perhaps he's adopted. Maybe he's a genius. I don't know. He has blonde hair while his parents have brown. So maybe that's not really, totally convincing. That happens in the real world quite often. But the theory that I like a little more and want so badly to be true is that JJ is a human man trapped inside the body of a toddler. Yeah, what a nightmare. My bones would hurt so much. I grew up watching Rugrats, and they would drive cars, they would ride on the backs of elephants, they did some crazy stuff. Reptar was voiced by Busta Rhymes my entire childhood. I had Busta Rhymes teach me how to count growing up. He did it fast too, like Reptar. But maybe there's something with JJ that I don't know. I don't know, maybe he's from the future or something. He thinks he's better than us or something, I don't know. He certainly acts like it, walking, talking baby, saying full sentences. Get out of here. I hope parents who have to watch the show are watching this and they agree right now that JJ is a narc. Something's going on with JJ over there, so hit that thumbs up if you think he's an undercover cop. Number 8, addictive viewers. Like I mentioned off the hop, some believe that there's a darker reason as to why so many kids are addicted to CoComelon. Having a tantrum, then it comes on and they're all of a sudden honed in. So when kids watch this show, first of all, it's stimulating. It's like Below Deck for adults, all right? It sucks you right in. The bright colors, the fun music, it draws you in, right? You're a human. Some would say it draws you in mindlessly. That's when you have to get a cutoff time for your iPads. See, it's normal for songs to be stuck in your head. I've had Brianna stuck in my head since Sunday, sure, but some parents have expressed concerns that their child may be addicted to this show, like on an adult binge, I should really do some work now type of level, which is not an ideal place for a youngin'. It's not really, can't start them off with the iPad addictions. Some people think that the music in the show has an underlying tone that adults can't even hear. These frequencies penetrate their brain and eardrums, making it resonate with them for hours, even releasing endorphins, leading us to believe that CoComelon is addictive. I mean, maybe a little bit, I don't know. I was addicted to Minecraft for a hot minute there, but 2 years of my life, gone. Number 7, brain development. Growing up, my parents would get mad if I played video games for too long. It would rot my brain, it would hypnotize me, something like that. I'm not really sure, I wasn't paying attention because I was too busy playing video games. But cut to today, parents love an iPad, don't they? It's easy. The amount of iPads I see with a safety cover, like for your kid, it baffles me. That shouldn't even be a thing. If you're raising your kid through an iPad, maybe this next point will change it up. I don't know, maybe try coloring? I don't know. What do I know though? Parents today are concerned once again that watching Cocomelon will affect their kids' brain development. Like watching too many cartoons back in the day. Some believe that the more dependent a child is on these videos, the more aggressive they will get when they don't get to see the show. I mean, fair. I don't know, maybe. They don't get their fix, then they start stomping around, they get all twitchy. They need their fix, maybe. Okay, maybe it's a little bit addictive. Dr. Cowan expressed concerns on parents.com. Yeah, we have a doctor to come in and save the day. Here we go. Dr. Cowan believes the key is just to monitor and to know and understand your child. Adding that, quote, not every child will respond to shows such as Cocomelon in the same way. There is no magical age when a child can graduate to a faster paced program. Pay attention to how your child is responding, and if they appear overstimulated or distressed, intervene if and when you feel it's necessary. End quote. Yeah, it's a nice way of saying, hey, be a parent. I don't know, just watch them for a bit. These factors can appear with Cocomelon more than, say, My Little Pony, because in My Little Pony, the scenes change every 4 to 6 seconds. Then it cuts away. It gives time for your child to absorb and learn what they're seeing. Cocomelon's scenes, they change every 1 to 3 seconds on average. That's like watching Infinity War in the front row of a theater. You're like, what's going on? Who is who? Who's that guy? Number 6, the Watts family connection. As Cocomelon continued to break records, parents started to become suspicious of this program. Why is it working so well? Who made this? What are these kids even singing or talking about? It's all so confusing. One theory is very most amazing top 10. It's very dark, okay? So bear with me. The Watts family attack. I'll say that. I can't say much about this incident because the details are far too much for YouTube. But back in 2018, in real life, an oil field operator named Christopher Lee Watts, he took the lives of his entire family. That's all I'll say about that. You do the rest. You can Google it. Watts, of course, was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole and is serving his sentence in a Wisconsin prison. But the names of the family are the same names of the family in Cocomelon. You get what I'm saying here? So parents are like, what? Parents quickly noticed that the Cocomelon school children, Cece, Bella, and Nico, were all too familiar. Yeah, what do we think? An oddly grim tribute or another weird coincidence? Both? Can it be both? Ooh. Number 5, free will. One Reddit user back in 2020 claimed that Cocomelon had a hidden connection to both animal and human. Yeah, had to save this for number 4. Can't start off the hop with this one, right? In Cocomelon, you will often see animals walking around on 2 legs. With a briefcase, you know, the classic Disney Pixar situation, just a hippo going to work with a briefcase. You're like, all right, this is a fun world. I want to live there. I'm in for a silly goose time. The freedom of these animals hint towards, if not confirm, the absence of zoos in this universe. But one little sneaky episode, it changes the game. In this episode, JJ and his family go to the local zoo, okay, and these animals are now behind bars. Is this jail? Did somebody just decide that these guys are bad or exhibits rather than tax-paying citizens like they were yesterday? I feel like there's an episode in between that we're missing, you know, some Breaking Bad, we gotta connect the dots, I don't know. Some have connected the dots to slavery, while others say they're looking a little too close into the matter, which, okay, maybe I kind of agree with. We're bringing out the S word here. If I was a kid, the first thing I would notice is the animals being behind bars. Imagine a zoo in Zootopia, you'd be like, wait, so what's that then? What's this place? Number 4, scary for adults. Yeah, babies with big heads and giant eyes. They don't blink and talk to you. That's gotta be pretty jarring. The perfect program is one for children and parents alike. Toy Story, for example, it's animated, it's silly, it's got good themes, but it's also jam-packed with jokes or themes that only an adult can understand. One of the toys from Sid's room, for example, was literally, it was with a hook, yeah. You get it? Cocomelon doesn't have any adult themes in that sense, but parents have expressed discomfort while watching along with their children. Adults today are already paranoid about the government listening in on them or spying on them in some way, shape, or form, so there's a great amount of people online that believe that this show is spying as well, or has subliminal messaging, or something government scary related, or it's run by some sort of AI programming. You know what I mean? They just don't trust the program, which is kind of funny. They're like, I don't know what it is, but the Illuminati. One parent took to Reddit and was like, don't let your kids watch this show, it's not worth it. I have nightmares about JJ's head spinning 360 degrees while singing Old MacDonald. Yeah, so if you're an adult, you're gonna watch it'll do some things to you as well. It's creepy. Number 3, tantrums. Ooh, I know about a tantrum quite well. I had a few of these back in my day. To those Toronto Zoo employees, I still apologize profusely. I don't know, something must have scared me. Experts have said that Cocomelon is not the cause of a child's tantrum, and that some parents turn on Cocomelon to keep their child occupied, but Other parents are worried that maybe their choice in programming is why their son hasn't been talking so much. So we have to ask, can a program aimed at babies and toddlers with characters singing nursery rhymes be really that bad? Psychologist Danielle Marullo says there have been some studies that look at the effects of watching TV on language and social development, and with these younger groups, it doesn't add to that development. It doesn't do much per se. Research tells us that the shows they watch need to have high quality educational content, and not all shows have educational content, let alone are in high quality to begin with. For kids under 2, playing and social interaction are key to social, language, and physical development, end quote. Thank you, Marullo. Marullo believes that it doesn't add anything to their development, it can actually take time away from things that do. So, yeah, just don't watch TV, do something else. Number 2, PewDiePie beef. Not exactly a theory, but this next one is so insane that I had to include it. Like I said earlier, CoComelon was huge on YouTube, on this box that you're on right now. And then they were huge on Netflix. That's a wild business plan. That's successful, they killed it. So much so that other YouTubers got involved in some rap battle beef. Yeah, like medieval flighting, he just had to cometh in and disrespecteth the youth. PewDiePie actually wrote a diss track about CoComelon, and it was so vulgar it got banned on YouTube. So I guess he did a good job, right? That's how you know it's good. One line was about how the show isn't funny and how these babies all have big heads. Not exactly a roast, but it's about the only line that I can reference from said diss track without us getting in trouble. It got so out of hand that a spokesperson from YouTube told The Verge that they removed the video because it encouraged abusive fan behavior. That's amazing. Hit that thumbs up. Thanks for joining us today. That's good. You guys are cults, I guess. And finally, number 1, demonic? Okay, we'll end on this one because, well, I kind of have to. CoComelon has been the subject of much debate, and hopefully you can agree in some way, shape, or form after watching this video. And of course, hitting that thumbs up and subscribe. Some people suggest that the channel is demonic. Yeah, because of its bright colors, its cheerful music, and innocent characters. All signs point to Satan, I guess. There is of course no factual evidence to back this up, but I'm sure a few parents out there would happily agree with me that it's demonic to watch. Parents have noted that the characters' facial expressions are robotic and creepy. I don't care what you say, nothing is creepier than Dora. Dora will ask you a question and then wait around for you to answer. That's terrifying. She's like, what sound does a cow make? Huh, Bryce? What's up? That's demonic, if anything.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Heart Feaster. This is one thing that I will never want in my life, and I am pretty confident that it will never happen to me, and that is sleep paralysis. Being stuck in a state where you can't move as you hallucinate in the dark sounds like something so villainous even Freddy Krueger wouldn't do it. He'd be like, at least kill them after, don't just let them sit there all night, that's gross. Luckily I sleep like a log, so there's no chance anything like that is going to happen to me, but for some others this can happen quite often. When people are stuck in sleep paralysis, it can be something as simple as having the feeling that someone is watching you as you're sleeping, while other people will have the Heart Feaster. A story online talked about a horrible entity that would come visit someone as they slept. They named this beast the Heart Feaster because it would lurk into their room when they couldn't move and then it would crawl on top of them. The creature looked like its body was made out of a dark crimson and it had long fingers that were almost like claws. Its face resembled a demon with a long pointed nose and jagged teeth. While this person was stuck and unable to move, the Heart Feaster would reach its long piercing fingers into their chest and pull out their heart and start eating it in front of them. Wow. At number 9 we have the Stalker. This next story was told by a young boy who grew up in a very old house. He said strange creaking noises coming from all over the home at any time of night was very common, but what wasn't common was something called the Stalker. Every now and again he would see something out of the corner of his eye. He wouldn't think that it was anything and he would just go on about his business. That was until he saw it. It was something he called the Stalker. He said it looked like the girl from The Ring, but it was on all fours. When he looked at it, the Stalker just stayed in one spot for what felt like an eternity. The ghost was locked in one spot until it scampered into another room. He told his parents about it, but he brushed it off and said it was a dream. However, our writer was certain that it happened because he went to investigate the spot where the Stalker was, and there were 2 wet handprints on the floor. At number 8 we have a short one. Some of my favorite ghost stories are the short ones. It's impressive what you can do with a few sentences. This one goes like this. I woke to the baby monitor crackling with a voice comforting my firstborn. As I adjusted to my new position, my arm brushed my wife sleeping next to me. Ooh, that is creepy. Coming in at number 7 7 we have imaginary friends. You would be surprised how many kids have imaginary friends that end up being ghosts. In fact, I did a multi-part series on Most Amazing Top 10 all about this. One of the most horrific stories I read about this was a young boy and girl used to have the same imaginary friend. It was just a voice that they would hear. It kept telling them to go into the woods behind their home. They would just ignore it and they really didn't think much of it. In fact, they didn't even know that the other sibling was hearing the voice until they brought it up with each other years later. The scariest part about this was when their younger sister, who was just old enough to talk, started saying that she could hear a voice that told her to go play outside in the trees. Ho ho. Coming in at number 6 we have glowing eyes. A girl was walking home late one night and she can feel something is off. She's not sure what it could be, but she knows she doesn't feel safe. She looks back over her shoulder and she sees a tall man in a trench coat who seems to be swaying side to side as he walks towards her. He's about 30 feet away and she can't make out his face except for a massive grin. This is obviously extremely frightening, so this young lady starts to move quickly, but it seems no matter how fast she moves, he keeps gaining on her. Eventually, she starts running and she can hear laughter start to come from behind her. She's now sprinting and looks back over her shoulder to see how close this man is, and the last thing she sees is the man right behind her with his massive eyes that are glowing red. Coming in at number 5 we have grave robbers. This is a pretty famous story about two young boys who wanted to give a scare to their friends. Now, is this story true or is it just an urban legend? It's hard to tell. Apparently there were two kids who loved to play pranks on people. One day they decided they wanted to play the ultimate prank by digging up a dead body and scaring their friends with it. So they went to the local graveyard in the middle of the night and they started digging. When they finally worked their way down to the body, they started cheering in excitement. The people living nearby heard the noises and they thought that the dead were rising from their graves. They ran and attacked the two boys, mistaking them for zombies. They were both killed and now their ghosts haunt the graveyard. Coming at number 4 we have voodoo priestesses of New Orleans. New Orleans has a long history of voodoo, and apparently there are people who live out in the bayou who have found a way to communicate with the dead. They will talk to the spirits of the dead who have been left to walk the earth without anyone to listen to them. Because these voodoo practitioners have spent the time learning how to talk to spirits, they can command power over them. They can use the dark magic of the dead to cast spells on people, bringing them misfortune. That really sounds like it sucks. Coming at number 3 we have another short one. Alright, we have room for one more short scary ghost story before I hit you with the top 2. I think this one might be my favorite short ghost story of all time, and it goes like this. My daughter won't stop crying and screaming in the middle of the night. I visit her grave and ask her to stop, but it doesn't help. Oh, that gives me goosebumps. Coming in at number 2 we have My Friend in the Basement. A young girl who is about 5 years old moves into a new home with her mom. The two of them love the place, but the mother notices something strange about her daughter. She spends a lot of time in the basement, talking and laughing like there's someone there. Sometimes she'll walk down to check on her to see who she's talking to, and every time there's no one there. One day her daughter comes back upstairs with a bite mark on her arm, and her daughter says, "Richard bit me." Her mom tells her that she is not allowed to play in the basement anymore. Then that night something attacks her daughter in her bed. The mother rushes in the room when she hears the poor daughter screaming. When she finds her daughter, she's still alive, but she has scratch marks all over her body. The next morning the two of them leave the home, never to return. And at the number 1 spot we have the taps. Something that ghosts love to do is turn on the taps and jack up your water bill. If you go online and search for this, you will find countless stories of ghosts who love to mess around with the water. This one was pulled off of Reddit, and it was about a young girl who was living alone, and she was often woken up by the sounds of running water. At first she thought that maybe she forgot to turn off the taps, but it started happening so frequently that she assumed that she was sleepwalking. But then it started happening when she wasn't home. Terrified that someone was breaking into her house when she wasn't there, she called the police. They came to check out the place, but they couldn't find anything. So her next best move was to set up cameras and spend the night at a friend's house. Then she saw it, the taps in the home turning on by themselves. Now it's time to go down the spiritual route and have someone come in and fix the ghost problem. A medium came through to contact the ghost, and it turns out there was a body of a girl who had been drowned in a tub that was in the home, who had been buried under the house. That is spooky.
Starting off this list at our number 10 spot, we have Alexa's Riddle. This story comes from Reddit user unicorn_rider123, and they wrote, quote, "So hubby and I live in Massachusetts. We were in Rhode Island for the day. My husband gets a phone call from some 866 number. number. It said it was Alexa, and in a creepy voice said, "How about we play a little game? Say, Alexa, tell me the riddle of the day." Then just hung up. Frickin' creepy. I checked the logs, nothing. I checked to see if we had that skill. Nope. I'm not entirely sure what in the jigsaw came over Alexa in that moment, but I guess she had something to say. I hate these stories about people checking the history and seeing no evidence that anything super spooky even happened. Like, where could it have gone? How is there no trace of it left behind? Either I'm getting pranked, or there's something seriously sinister happening here. In our number 9 spot today, we have The Stormy Night. This story comes from Reddit user Shirasar_A, and they wrote, quote, "We have Alexa and Hue bulbs. In the middle of the night, I'm passed out in bed. My husband was working nights at the time. Apparently it was storming outside and the power was knocked out briefly. Well, for those that don't know, Hue bulbs automatically come on full brightness when you regain electricity. You can disable it now. So I'm asleep, it's who knows when, my bedroom lights turn on full brightness and I hear a woman's voice say, 'Hello.' Needless to say, I woke up and about myself, assuming someone was in the house. That was the night we disconnected our Amazon Dot and never used it again. That would be absolutely terrifying, especially in that confused daze that you get when you're suddenly woken up in the middle of the night. Also, now you got a storm outside too. It's just a real nightmare scenario that thankfully we all now know you can disable the feature, so hopefully we can all just continue to sleep peacefully without the fear of a terrifying wake-up call. In our number 8 spot today, we have the haunted Alexa. This Reddit post comes from the user Goblin Marketeer, which is a great username, and they write, quote, "I have an Echo Dot because the original owner thought it was haunted. She would randomly start talking, usually saying, 'Sorry, I'm having trouble understanding you right now,' to a totally silent room, or give the weather for Cincinnati when we live in New York, when no one asked. Or offering to call a contact from her list, again to a completely silent room, and the contacts always started with S. The last straw before it was tossed in a box and given to me was something like self-destruct code not given, self-destruct aborted." Well, that is terrifying for sure. At this point, the new owner isn't sure if the Alexa itself is haunted, or if it was just the house that it came from that is holding the creepy spirit. Either way, that Alexa is definitely holding onto something strange there. In our number 7 spot today, we have The Nightmare. This post was made by Reddit user MeJock, and they wrote, quote, "My wife took the kids to visit her grandmother for a week. We had just moved into a new house and bought some furniture, so I was stayed home to spend the week building/mounting the furniture to get the house ready for the fam. Anyway, on the first night after they left, I was mounting some shelves and cabinets in one of the bedrooms when I suddenly hear this loud and very weird sound coming from downstairs, kind of like a scream. I assumed it was the cat howling to get outside. Then suddenly, I heard it again. I froze and listened. There were a few seconds of silence, and then I heard it again. After a few seconds, I realized that it wasn't the cat. I recognized the sound as being the voice of my baby. My mind started racing. My kids and wife are in another country right now, so how the hell am I hearing the sound of my baby loudly emanating from downstairs? After a minute or so of thinking, my super paranoid mind came to the conclusion that either A, someone has hacked into our laptop and is remotely viewing videos of our kid, or even worse, B, while I've been up here listening to music, some creep broke in and is sitting down there at our table watching videos of our kids. I decide I have to quote unquote man up and check it out. So, my heart pounding in my chest, I grab my hammer and start creeping down the stairs. Then I pause, thinking that I should grab my phone just in case I need to make a quick call to the police. Mind you, all the while I'm hearing the sounds of my children from downstairs and it is creeping me out. I reach into my pocket, pull out my phone, and then I realize what was happening. Somehow I had basically butt opened, similar to butt dialed, my videos on my phone and they had started playing in my pocket. My phone was paired to the Echo and thus the audio from the videos was being played via the Echo. Ah, the good old Bluetooth connection that we forgot was on. Always a terrifying experience, but this one just might take the cake when it comes to full-blown horror. In our number 6 spot today, we have chemtrails. If you were to ask Alexa what a chemtrail is, she just might get the conspiracy theory energy flowing through you. I personally don't have an Alexa, but I do have a Google, and I trust what this thing says. But I'm learning that while these assistants are of course very smart robots, sometimes sometimes they may lead us a bit astray, and depending on your beliefs, this could be one of those instances. If you ask Alexa what a chemtrail is, she won't give you a super straightforward response, but she will show her true conspiracy colors. Her answer would be along the lines of, quote, chemtrails. Trails left by aircrafts that are usually chemical or biological agents deliberately sprayed at high altitudes for a purpose undisclosed to the general public in clandestine programs directed by government officials. Okay, Alexa's really out here just spreading the rumors. If you are mistrusting of the government or easily persuaded by these sorts of theories, it's best to perhaps refrain from asking your Alexa this question. In our number 5 spot today, we have undercover secrets. This Alexa story comes from a Reddit user, and they said, quote, I asked her if she sent my recordings to the NSA, and she just blinked off. Now when I ask her about it, she just gives me this long spiel how Amazon takes privacy very seriously. This is definitely peculiar considering what happens if you ask Alexa if she works for the CIA or really any secretive agency. There are of course tons of conspiracy theories out there surrounding all of these little assistant things, whether it's Alexa or Google and that sort of thing. Whatever your product, there's a theory out there for it. Asking Alexa if she is connected to a government agency, especially if you're already someone who maybe kind of believes in these theories, her really non-answer might kind of send you into a rabbit hole of internet searching to find out the truth. For a long time when asked this question, Alexa wouldn't respond at all and instead would just turn on and off, which kind of freaked a ton of people out. Since then, however, there has been an update in how she responds to the question. Instead now she gives a humorous response, not really a direct answer, using humor as a deflection tactic. Very interesting, Alexa, smart move. Or like in this case where she just gives a privacy and security spiel. Maybe she's just trying to trick us, bore us into moving on. In our number 4 spot today, we have the scary movie. This story comes from a Reddit user that was replying to a prompt asking about people's creepiest Alexa stories. The user wrote, quote, my husband was away for the weekend and I had a girlfriend over to watch scary movies. Right at the scariest climax of the movie, every single light in my house turned on 100%, then everything went completely black. Of course, that is so frightening. Did the movie unleash some sort of demon? Is the killer really in the house? My adrenaline would be so high. I'd be so on edge. That can't be just a coincidence. And also, what does this have to do with Alexa? Well, the user continues their post and finishes it by saying, quote, so there we were, too scared to move, while my husband halfway across the country was drunkenly showing off, look, I can control the lights in my house from my phone. Well, that definitely explains that. I guess just remind your spouse, partner, roommate, friend, whoever shares an Alexa system with you, that just because they're not home doesn't mean that you're not. In our number 3 spot today, we have hiding the body. Many people used to do this with Siri as well when she was first unveiled, but it's definitely not something that is recommended. You can ask Alexa or any of your digital assistants the chilling question of where to hide a dead body. Of course, I assume and hope that anyone doing this is only trying to ask a shocking question to see what kind of answer they get and not really wondering the answer to this horrible question. But Alexa's answer might just give you quite a fright. Apparently, she will answer this question by saying, quote, calling the police is the right thing to do. And while I wholeheartedly agree with that answer, whether you're asking her this question seriously or not, those first 3 words might scare the absolute crap out of you for a second before she continues on. Calling the police. Just, okay, so scary. I know if that were me, my soul would simply leave my body for a second. That is definitely an answer that could freak anybody out, and the question is just one that is best to stay away from, okay? In our number 2 spot today, we have Alexa Help. Posted to Reddit by the user Sluzella, this story reads, quote, one night about 2 months ago I was visiting my parents and my mom and I were sitting in the living room reading. Dad is at work, brother is at school, house is completely silent. All of a sudden we hear our Alexa from the kitchen go, help, in the weirdest static/gravel voice at full volume. We both, of course, jump and stare at each other. Then Alexa does it again. We go in the kitchen and the Alexa is activated and that light blue light, which usually faces the direction of whoever is speaking to it, is facing into the dark corner of the kitchen. My mom asks, Alexa, are you okay? The Alexa totally shuts off. Alexa, she turns back on and in her completely normal voice at a regular volume does her standard, hi, what can I help you with? Or whatever she says. She hasn't done anything that creepy since, but according to my parents, she will randomly turn on like she's being addressed or just start reading random facts or the weather, even if the house is totally silent and nothing could have triggered her. Totally creeps me out, and I refuse to get one for my apartment because of this. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have voice not recognized. This story comes from the Reddit user CRB2519, and it is a super short but very effective, like a one-line horror story. All they write is, quote, "It said voice not recognized, but I didn't say anything and I live alone." Either Alexa is speaking to herself now and doesn't even recognize her own voice, or she really is out here talking to ghosts. I remember that on previous parts of this list, we spoke about how there are people out there who truly believe that our Alexa devices have the ability to see into different realms, including ones that may or may not have some sort of paranormal entities. Could this just be another sign of that, or is this only proving the conspiracy theories out there? Or is this just one rather terrifying glitch? Either way, I can assure you that if this happened to me, Alexa would swiftly be getting unplugged.
Starting us off at number 10, a creepy drive-through man. This first story comes from the Reddit user Jaderade, and well, it just goes to show how weird and creepy people can be. Quote, "I worked at a McDonald's in high school and was almost always the person in the first drive-through window. At night, since we didn't have a dishwasher, it was also my job to do the dishes. One night when it was very busy, a 50 to 60-year-old man pulled up to the window in his very low car to pay for his food. I had my hair in a braided high ponytail. The man flashed me a creepy smile and commented on how nice my hair was and how it's such a good handle. Now, while that would be a creepy thing to say to any person, let me just remind you that this girl was in high school. She continues on saying, quote, "I was very confused and weirded out, so I stepped over to do the dishes as soon as I could. After a bit, I thought I saw the cars move, so I walked over to help the next customer, but when she looked out the window, she saw that the cars had in fact not moved, and that the same creepy old man was watching, let's just say, explicit content on 2 separate smartphones." Coming in at number 9, a lawsuit. This next one comes from the user the_heartless, and they start off by saying that they worked at McDonald's about 22 years ago, admitting that they did not last long at this job due to the constant insanity that was always going on. The worst time though involved an actual lawsuit after someone fell off the top of the equipment in the play place and broke their arm. Quote, "A photographer came to the store to take pictures of the equipment for the pending lawsuit. The store manager gave the okay and the guy went out to do what he came to do. However, things got even more out of hand when the owner of the franchise came in, found out that the guy was outside on the playground not taking pictures, and so the owner went out to confront the guy. Quote, "After a few heated comments, the store owner starts to shove the photographer, telling him to get the hell off my property before it eventually turned into a full-on fist fight between the two men. To make matters worse, apparently this entire ordeal had an audience of grade schoolers as well, who all came running into the store screaming and crying about what they had just witnessed." Yeah, I would not have lasted very long either, my friend. Coming in at number 8, a vomit fight. There are many unhinged things that I can imagine going down in a McDonald's late at night. However, you would think that in the middle of the day, it might be a more civilized place. However, according to Emily AML on Reddit, I thought wrong. They say one of the worst things that ever happened to them on the job was when, quote, "a kid vomited and proceeded to pick up fistfuls of chunks and throw them at other kids who then also were vomiting. We closed the play place for like 2 weeks to have the whole thing heavy duty cleaned and sterilized by a higher out company." Now, unfortunately, you would think that this is the gross part of the story, but it actually comes next. Apparently during the time they were closed for cleaning, quote, "one woman got angry that her kids couldn't play. She yelled, 'I'll show you clean,' ripped the hazard tape off the door, broke the lock, and proceeded to put her finger down her throat and barf all over. The way in which there isn't a world I would jump to that solution." To make matters more insane, apparently she later tried to sue the owner, stating that the chemicals in the play place, which she had forcibly entered, made her so sick she was hospitalized. Next up at number 7, a slide. I
I don't know what it is about McDonald's that attracts so many stories involving bodily fluids, but alas, here I am with yet another one for you. Posted by user Master Inceptor, they say the absolute worst day of their employment at McDonald's involved, you guessed it, someone else's poop. Quote, some kid climbed all the way to the top of the slide, took his pants off, and slid down the slide. Problem is, he pooped the whole way down. According to our Reddit friend here, the stinky trail spanned the entire second half of the slide. But that's not all. Quote, we only found out because some other kids slid down that slide and came out covered in chunky liquid poop and crying uncontrollably. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a few questions here. Was the parent or guardian of the original poop slide maker not aware this had happened? Did they not think to maybe, I don't know, clean it up or at least deter people from going down that slide? Well, whoever did clean it up definitely deserves a raise if you ask me. Coming in at number 6, ball pits of hell. While they might have been fun to play in as a kid, looking back, I can only imagine the kinds of germs that were creeping around in those godforsaken ball pits in the play place. And if they are at all like the ones described in this story, it's a damn miracle we weren't all walking away with pink eye every time we played in one. Posted to Reddit by user Nerds Call Me Geek, they say that, quote, the ball pits were cesspools of germs. They're impossible to clean, so grease, food, snot, and literal human poop are smeared on all of those balls you're crawling through. They then go further into detail, stating, quote, you don't even want to know what that liquid on the bottom is, or what just pricked your toe. Is it a needle? A piece of broken glass? Who knows? Just be glad you didn't bump into a carcass. Seriously, they have found dead bodies in ball pits before. Now, in terms of the corpse part, I looked for a documented incident of that happening, but I was not successful. But I still agree that ball pits are one of the most disgusting places ever. Coming in at number 5, mom fight. Our next story comes from the user beyond_birthday, and it just goes to show you the power of a mama bear when she thinks her little one is in danger. Our Reddit friend says, while working a midday shift once, quote, 2 kids got into a pretty big argument, lots of hair pulling, pushing, etc. I was feeling pretty tired that day and I didn't really bother to do anything because it looked like their parents noticed anyway. One of the kids was fairly older than the other one, and the mother of the younger kid was pretty mad that her kid was being bullied. The mother of the older kid just shrugged it off and turned away. Apparently the mother of the younger kid didn't like that because within seconds she had grabbed her by the hair and slammed her face into one of the plastic slides. Reddit friend then went on to explain that the whole play place began to freeze and watch in horror as the younger kid's mom proceeded to push the older kid's mom headfirst into the ball pit while also desperately trying to kick her in the head. Quote, the last thing I saw, she jumped up and tried to elbow drop her pro wrestling style. I quickly got my manager, who called the police. The fighter was thrown into the police car, and I'm pretty sure they had to get an ambulance for the other woman. Needless to say, the play place was closed early that day. Next up at number 4, health code problems. As far as terrifying stories go, I deeply wish this one was more surprising than it is. I only say that because I have seen some icky McDonald's in my day. But that being said, it is still nausea-inducing to say the least. According to Reddit user Lordidius, quote, every few months the restaurant undergoes an inspection for a McOpCo consultant. This is called an FOR. Now, this makes sense. It is a restaurant handling food after all. But they then go on to say, quote, before the FOR, the owner gets everyone to clean, paint, brush up on their skills/habits, etc. And one of these occasions, I was tasked with cleaning behind the vats and the grills. But what was underneath was horrendous. Apparently, the accumulation of the grease and dropped rotting meat products that were festering underneath were enough to give them nightmares. Plus, if that wasn't gross enough, quote, the grease was pooled on the floor and there were grease stalagmites on the ground, and trapped in the burnt and encrusted filth were hundreds of flies. I am not sure I will ever be able to think about those grills the same ever again. Coming in at number 3,
a fryer incident. Posted by a now deleted Reddit account, this user explains that the worst thing they ever saw while working at McDonald's was so traumatizing that it actually still haunts them to this day. Quote, I worked at an Oklahoma McDonald's for 3 years in high school / undergrad, and I witnessed a guy reach into a deep fryer, bare-handed, up to his elbow to retrieve a wayward McNugget. I mean, I know how bad it hurts when a little spat of bacon fat lands on my hand, let alone the agony of an entirely submerged forearm. I have to imagine that he was either a younger person not thinking things through, or that he just had a total mind blip. But either way, the Reddit user stated that it was, quote, the worst scream I've ever heard, and when he yanked his arm out of the fryer, an arc of hot grease shot across the make line and hit some girl in the face. Talk about a traumatizing shift for everyone involved. I hope that poor girl's face was okay, and I hope that the young man was rushed to the hospital immediately. Coming in at number 2, making milkshakes. In the theater, there's a saying, the show must go on. I'm sure you've heard of it, but even so, in a life or death situation, that would never be upheld. And the last place I would think this kind of mantra would apply would be a McDonald's drive-through, but according to Road Dog 1, that is exactly what happened. Quote, I worked at a McDonald's and learned firsthand how the place slowly sucks your soul away. For example, one day I was working, and as I was about to take the order of the next person in line, he just effing fell over and started having a heart attack. Everyone froze, and I ran to the back of the store and told the manager to call an ambulance, which she promptly did. But the sick part is, while this man was lying on the floor, turning blue and dying 3 feet away from me, my other managers told me I was required to keep working. So here I am, making an effing milkshake with some guy dying right in front of my face so that the people waiting in line at the drive-thru can get on with their day. Meanwhile, the customers seated at the tables continued to eat and converse despite the turmoil surrounding them. Some were even pointing at the guy suffering from the heart attack and laughing to their friends. It may just be the most callous workplace I have ever been a part of. And last up in our number 1 spot, disaster averted. There have been several rumors that have circulated the internet about infected needles being hidden in ball pits. And while thankfully most have been unfounded, it's still a terrifying thought to think about. Similarly to those is this last story about the most terrifying thing that ever happened to Reddit users Shaggy101's cousin while working at McDonald's. Quote, my cousin, who worked in a McDonald's, told me about the time he was mopping the floor near a ball pit and he could hear a few high school students, probably about 16 to 18 years old, laughing. He looked over to their table, which had a pile of balls on it that they had collected. He was about to ask them to put them back when he noticed one of them was super gluing razor blades to the balls and throwing them back into the pit. Luckily enough, the pit area was empty, so he calmly placed cleaning signs around the pit and went to the office to phone the police. Police came after the high schoolers left, so they only took some footage and left. My cousin told me that he and a coworker found at least 30 balls with razor blades stuck to them. Like, actually, what is wrong with people?
Starting off this countdown, we have the black hair girl. Now, this is said to be a very old Japanese story that has scared kids for generations and generations. So once upon a time, there was a poor samurai living in Kyoto with his wife. One day he gets visited by a wealthy man and he was like, come work for me. So he leaves his wife, works for this dude, and then gets with another woman and just leaves his wife all alone. Years later, he finishes his service for that dude and comes back and realizes he misses his ex-wife. So he heads on over to their old home, and there she was, happily welcoming home. He fell asleep wrapped in her arms. But when he woke up, he discovered he was holding her cold, rotting corpse covered in her black hair. Turns out that his wife passed away many years before from sadness.
Coming in the number 9 spot, we have Kanabari Nyodo. This tale is known as the Bald Man, and it will make you close the blinds in every room in your home. The Bald Man is a tale people would tell to kids to remind them to lock their windows and keep their blinds shut. The story goes like this. The Bald Man was a big time creep. He would go from house to house and peer through people's windows to try and see them naked. This was the favorite pastime of this peeping Tom. Eventually he was caught, and it was discovered that he'd been doing this for quite some time. His family disowned him, and as a punishment, his head was shaved bald. Now this marked weirdo had nowhere to go, and he was forced to live out in the mountains in a self-made hut. While secluded, his urge to peep on people only grew, and one day he returned to the village to try and kidnap someone. In the attempt, he was killed, but it turns out perverts never die. His ghost lived on and said that people will see a bald phantom in a white kimono that will spy on people when they're naked. Someone please call the Ghostbusters. I have some creepy ghosts spy on me while I'm on the toilet.
No kidding.
It's making it very hard for me to go.
Well, just give me the address. We got one!
And guys, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and hit the little notification bell, and stick around until the end of this list because we're going to be shouting up some comments from our collab video, Top 10 Deadly Climate Change Predictions.
So stay tuned. Coming in at number 8, we have 8 feet tall. This story has to do with a creature known as Hashishaku-sama. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. It was very hard. Basically, this creature is super thin and tall, standing at 8 feet tall. Now, she appears to be an attractive woman on the outside, but she is far from being human. This creature is known to trick and abduct kids. It is said that anyone who sees her is doomed to die in the next few days. She is said to have long black hair and is typically seen wearing a white summer dress paired with a wide-brimmed hat, so she's quite fashionable. In fact, she tends to attract children by comforting them and making herself seem like a trustworthy adult. People also say that she can mimic the voice of their parents to also try to trick the children. But don't be fooled, for if you do, you will be killed by her evil wrath.
Coming in at number 7, we have Beto Beto-san. You know that creeping feeling you get when you're walking around late at night and you're all alone? Sometimes you peek over your shoulder because you're convinced that someone is looking at you or following you. You can't shake this feeling. Then it seems like you hear someone behind you walking. Well, that is Beto Beto-san. This is the Japanese ghost that will follow you when you're alone at night. You can hear his footsteps, but then when you turn around to look for it, there's no one there. Now, if you ask me, this sounds like a terrifying ghost. Something that stalks you in the night when the only thing protecting you is a dim streetlight and the shriek that will come out of me when I realize there's something behind me. But in Japan, Beto Beto-san is actually considered cute. If you're walking alone at night and you hear some steps behind you, you're supposed to say, Beto Beto-san okasi ni okoshi. And this translates to, Beto Beto-san, please pass in front. There's even a statue of him around certain cities, and it says you can leave coins in his mouth for good luck.
In our 6th spot, we have the purple mirror. This story surrounds a young girl who is obsessed with her appearance. So much so that she spends her days just staring at herself in the mirror. That's all she cared about. But while doing so, she became really malnourished and gaunt looking. But all she saw in the mirror was her beautiful self, until one day she decided to paint the mirror purple, and that's when she saw what she truly looked like. In disgust, she smashed the mirror. Time passed on, and on her 20th birthday, she got hit and killed by a car. As she was dying, her final words were purple mirror, purple mirror. After the funeral, a bunch of visitors were found dead under weird circumstances. They all died when they turned 20, and all were found dead with shards of purple glass by them. Good thing that I already turned 20 long time ago.
Coming in at number 5, we have Kokori-san. If you guys have watched my content before, you might know what I'm about to say. I don't mess with Ouija boards. I refuse to use them, and they creep me out, and the Kokori-san is basically the Japanese version of a Ouija board. There are some key differences though. When you use a Ouija board, the intention is to contact someone from the spirit world, maybe a dead relative, and 9 times out of 10 you end up in contact with some demon that will eat your heart. But with Kokori-san, you're actually contacting a spirit of a trickster who is named Kokori-san. This thing is like the Captain Planet of little trickster animals. This thing is part fox, part dog, part raccoon, and when you put them all together, it sounds like one of the cutest animals that has ever lived. But this is still a trickster god. It will come down and mess with you, and I don't need that kind of mojo in my life.
And at number 4 we have the Snake Woman. The Snake Woman is a Japanese legend about a weird creature with a body of a massive snake and a head of a woman. She's also got creepy snake eyes, a long snake-like tongue with fangs, and long black hair. It's said that this creature lurks the shores, waiting to pounce on innocent swimmers or fishermen. What she will do is trick them. She will pretend like she's drowning, and then when they go to save her, she will snatch them and drag them underwater. She also can paralyze her victims with her eyes, and then use her tongue to suck out all their blood. This is used as a cautionary tale to warn children about swimming or going near water at night or by themselves.
Coming in number 3, we have Futakuchiona. If you know someone who doesn't eat a lot but they still seem to gain weight, they might be Futakuchiona. The English translation of this creature is the two-mouthed woman. She is a woman who has been cursed with a second mouth on the back of her head that is never satisfied, that always needs to eat. Her front-facing mouth seems to be small and never eat. It's so small and shy. The mouth on the back of her head though, that thing is massive and drooling and constantly demanding more food, and it can use the woman's hair like long tentacles that grips food and slams it down the second mouth. If the woman doesn't eat, the second mouth will cause her pain. So she's kind of in a tough spot. How this creature came to be has a couple of different tales, but I think the one I like the best is about a man who remarries and his new wife doesn't like his daughter at all. Eventually the man has a baby with his new wife, and every time she serves the two kids, she starves the one child who is not hers by birth. Eventually that child dies. Then one day the dude is chopping wood and accidentally hits his wife in the head with an axe. That sounds a little sus if you ask me. The slash then turns into a mouth that constantly eats and is never full. This is the curse that is given to her for starving that poor child.
In our second spot we have the Red Crayon. This story begins with a newly married couple that moved into their first house together. One day the husband was walking down the hall when he noticed a red crayon lying on the floor, which was weird because they didn't have any children, so he didn't know where the crayon came from. So whatever, he picked it up and tossed it into the trash. But the next day he found another red crayon in the exact same spot. Finding this weird, he went and asked his wife about it. Apparently she had also been finding red crayons in the exact same spot as well. So they both started inspecting the hallway. At one point the husband began ripping the hallway wallpaper off the wall and noticed a room hidden there, all boarded up. They then removed all the boards, and that's when they found a small hidden room. Inside was their worst nightmare. Written all over the walls in red crayon was, "I'm sorry, mommy, let me out. I'm sorry, mommy, let me out."
Coming in at the number 1 spot, we have Oshiro Ibaba. All of us want to be beautiful, even the people who say they don't care about the way they look or the way that others look. Deep down, there's an urge to be attractive. It's not a shallow thing, it's just a human thing. Well, Oshiro Ibaba, or the face powder demon, preys on this need for people to look good. She only appears on a cold night. She always has a walking stick and a large round hat that covers her face. She doesn't want you to see who she is because this might reveal the fact that she is a horrible demon. She looks for a young girl who might be wanting to look prettier. She preys on those of us with low self-esteem. Pretty rude if you ask me. When she finds a poor girl who craves the secrets of higher beauty, she will offer her some face powder, a secret blend that is supposed to make the girl even more beautiful than she's ever been before. The young girl can't resist, so she takes the powder and dabs some on her face. Well, that was a big mistake. The powder causes the girl's face to decay rapidly until there's nothing left but a skull. Then the Oshiro Ibaba takes the chunks of flesh that fell off the girl's face and uses them for nefarious things. Like more powder.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have The Death. This one comes from Reddit user DQ Supervisor, who said, "Okay, this is going to sound crazy, but I can't find a better explanation. I was driving down County Road 28 just outside of my city. The road is basically a straight line for a bit, and I watched a car driving toward me in the opposite lane. It had blue headlights, and as it got closer, I saw that it was a black two-door car. As the car got up to me, it hit me head on. I saw my windshield smash, I saw the car roll over mine, I smelled the smoke. I felt all of the pain. I closed my eyes, I think I died. Then I opened them again, and I was in the same spot as I was less than about a minute before this person hit me. I saw the same car with the same blue headlights. As it got closer, I saw it was a two-door black car. I was freaking out because this car had just hit me a minute before, but it just kept on driving past and did not hit me. I 100% believe that that car did hit me. I will be finding another way to drive home from now on. Has anybody else experienced this? I do not have another explanation. All input and questions welcome. I must have got pushed from that universe into this one. Maybe not. I don't know anything about this stuff, but nothing else makes sense. At the number 9 spot now, we have The Passengers. This one came from Mark of Shame on Reddit. For some reason, this one felt really real to me. They said, driving home on a storm day, I see that a side road up to the local golf course is blocked off by flashing barricades. I also spy a Mercedes parked past the barricade with its hazards on. I stop and walk up to the car to see if they need help. I'm an EMT. I shine my light into the back seat to see a man slumped over, apparently asleep. Thinking I've got a few drunks, I move up to the driver window and rap on the glass and shine my light in. The driver is sitting bolt upright, unmoving, staring straight ahead. My window wrapping or light doesn't cause him to blink, flinch or move. I look over and the passenger is slumped forward onto the dash. This begins to creep me out. I call down to the sheriff's station and request a code 2 unit up to my location to help me check them out because the doors are locked. While on the phone, I walk back to the truck to get my go bag. As I'm on the phone with dispatch, she asked me to get a license number for the car just as a PG&E cherry picker truck comes rumbling down from up the closed road. I move to go around the truck to get the plate number and the car is gone. I talk to the driver of the truck and he said there was an 80-foot tree down across the road and that he didn't think it to be open for at least a day or so. So the question is, where the hell did the car go? Tree up one way, barricades down the other. It's kept me a bit unsettled when stopping at accidents and hazards ever since then. Coming at number 8 now, we have Changing Faces. Reddit user Eerie1 commented in a parallel universe thread saying that for a single day his parents' faces swapped. People obviously asked for more details. He said, I woke up in the morning and at first I didn't realize anything was weird because it was like 6 AM and I was still half asleep. But after showering for school and waking up a bit, I noticed that there was something weird about my mom. Then I realized it wasn't my mom, it was my dad, but he had my mom's face. I was gonna say something, but then my little brother got up and was like, good morning dad, like everything was normal. Then, before I had time to process everything, I had to leave for school. Everything was fine at school and I almost forgot all about it. But when I got home, I saw my dad again, still with my mom's face. Then my mom walks in and starts talking to him, and she has his face. At this point, I am just dumbfounded. I have no idea what's going on. So I just sit down and start doing my homework. And when my little brothers get back from school, they just act like nothing is wrong. So I just decided to go with it and not say anything at all. I mean, I didn't want them to think I was going crazy or anything. I woke up the next morning and everything is just back to normal, but I still have dreams about it sometimes. Moving on to number 7 now, we have The Garden. This is a strange one that comes from Stefan1403, whose story involves 3 generations of his family. He said, it was summer and my grandfather, grandmother, mom and I were working in the garden. It's pretty big and there's a lot of grass to be mowed and stuff like that. After all the work, my mom would always ask me to go and get some soda because everyone was thirsty from working. It was in the evening, but still pretty warm. After everyone had their soda, my mom asked me to put it in the back of the fridge, which was in the basement. Used as a living area, only a small part of it is really storage. So I go to the basement, and please note, the room with the fridge is like 20 or 30 seconds from the exit, and you have to pass 2 doors with those flappy anti-fly curtains. I put the soda in the fridge, close the fridge, and walk out. Seems normal, right? Except I had to do this 3 times. The soda kept reappearing whenever I put it in the fridge and turned my back on it. Everyone was outside and there was only 1 bottle of soda in the whole room. To this day, I am still confused over what exactly happened. There have probably been more moments like this in my life, but this is the one that I remember the most. At the number 6 spot now, guys, we have crossed wires. This one involves answering machines, hopefully. Some of you guys aren't too young to even know what they are. The story comes from Reddit user Kill All Extremists. They said, this happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend up and he wasn't home, so I left a message on his answering machine. I said, hey, it's me. Sorry I missed you. Call you later. Bye. And then I hung up and left the house. I made no other calls. Later that day, he called back and he says, wow, that was quite a message you left. Who was that girl you were talking to? I was like, what are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl. Well, as it turns out, the message didn't end after I said bye. I actually had to go over to his house and listen to this message a few times for myself. After my initial message that I did leave, as I already quoted, there was a slight pause and it continues on for another 30 to 40 seconds or so with me talking to some girl. It was my voice, but a conversation I never had with a girl whose voice I didn't recognize. You could compare it to the message I know I did leave, and the two voices were indistinguishable. Not just the voice, but talking mannerisms. It was my voice. Also, references to my occupation and activities were the same. Basically, in this conversation, I was talking to this girl about going skiing, but I had to go down to my shop and work on a car first, which totally correlated to me. Then the message just stopped. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that recorded the message to a chip, so there was no tape I could have taken and had analysed, unfortunately. Also, neither I nor my friend had party lines, so that's not an explanation. It was very freaky, and I just can't explain it. Moving on to the number 5 spot now, we have the closet. To get to Narnia, you have to go through the wardrobe. Everyone knows that. Do they also lead to other parallel worlds though? Reddit user Meanest Flower said, in my parents' bedroom was this really large master closet. It was technically just one closet, but it had 2 doors going into it. Between the 2 doors was a high shelf and a hanging rod for clothes, so it functioned like 2 separate walk-in closets, but you could walk from one to the other by ducking under any clothes hung in the middle. One night, she was in her side of the closet and she saw through the gap between the shelf and the clothes rod my dad walk into his side of the closet. She heard the metal coat hanger sliding as he looked for something to wear and saw the clothes in the middle sway as they were brushed from side to side. From her side of the closet, she started talking to him about something random. Then she heard the bathroom door open. She poked her head out of the closet to see my dad clearly just emerging from the shower. He walked to look into his side of the closet and nothing. And up until the moment she poked her head out to look at the bathroom door, she would swear to you she could still see my dad in that closet. Next up at number 4 now, we have the money. This one comes from Reddit user ShadowJack00. The story is actually from a friend of theirs. They said, a friend of mine from Toronto was in a bar in New York on a business trip. As he paid for drinks and food a few times during the night, he noticed a woman watching him intently. After a while, she came over and struck up a conversation with him. Eventually, she commented that she noticed he had coloured money in his wallet. She seemed, as he put it, eager to the point of being afraid to mention it. He told her, yes, he was Canadian and he had some Canadian money in his wallet. She demanded he show her, and so he did. She was apparently very disappointed and started to cry a bit, but refused to talk about it any further. Feeling bad, he tried to cheer her up and the two of them got a bit hammered together. He admitted that his goal was to not spend the night alone, but he did anyway. At one point, he asked her why she wanted to see his Canadian money, and after a lot of coaxing and more drinks, she told him. She said that up until a few months before, US money had always been different colours. Ones were green, 10s were blue, and 100s were brown. She couldn't remember the other colours, she told him. She said the colours were not bright like Canadian money, but were sort of a set of dark tints. She said the brown 100s were called bricks because the brown tint they had was similar to a brick. Then she said one day they were all green, and she was the only one who seemed to remember them being different colours. My friend pressed her, and she said there were other differences too, not just money that she noticed. Popular TV programs were different or had the wrong actors in the lead roles. There was more, but my friend couldn't remember what else she said. After a while, she just started crying, saying she finally thought she had found someone who would convince her she wasn't going crazy, and he turned out to be a Canadian instead. Shortly after, she left, and that was the end of that. Moving on to number 3 now, guys, we have Quantum Thief. Now that has to be possibly the coolest name I've ever given to a story on this channel. I bet that will be a movie title one day. Anyway, this one comes from Reddit user Naimaz, who said, ever since I was a kid, I have what I call doubling occasionally happen around me. I put something in a pocket, then later find it in another pocket, as well as the original in the original pocket that I put it in. And yes, it has happened to money before. The most standout example was when I was a teen at camp. All the leaders had engraved plastic name tags, and we were issued only one. I used to keep moving mine between my hat and my shirt. At the end of camp, I just crammed all my stuff in a duffel bag and headed home. Later, when I unpacked, the first thing I do is to pull out my hat with the tag on it. Okay, so that's where I had it last, I thought. And of course, a minute later, I pull out a shirt with the same name tag pinned to it. I also experienced a similar phenomenon when I was a kid. For a few years, it happened on a daily basis, but haven't seen it in a long time now. Someone would place something in their pocket or backpack, but when they went to grab it later, it would be missing. I would then reach into my backpack or pocket and pull the item out. I initially got accused a lot of being a thief, but when it happened repeatedly, when I hadn't even been within 20 feet of the victim, my friends and classmates stopped doing so and just kind of accepted that would always happen around me. Next up at number 2 now, we have pancakes. This is a very recent one posted to Reddit by user Jules Smur, who said, when I was around 7 or 8, I distinctly remember going to a restaurant and getting a plate full of fruit and then heading back to my hotel and went to the hot tub. My sister Alex and I were talking about the activities we had done that day, and before we knew it, we headed back to our room. Our parents were at the casino and had left us pancakes and a note saying they'd be back in a few hours. We went to bed and had this dream that there was a bunch of lights with my sister's voice in the background. When I had awoken, me and my sister were in a cabin in a completely different state. I went to wake up my sister and I told her about my dream. It turns out we both had the same one, but instead of me hearing her voice, she heard mine. We both had no clue what to do, so we walked around. There had been a hot tub near our cabin and the same lady working at the other restaurant. We had talked about going to the fruit bar with our parents and had asked them if we drove to a different place while we were sleeping, but they just gave us a strange look and asked us what we were talking about. To this day, me and my sister still talk about what happened that night and think of new theories to explain what happened to us. And finally at number 1 now, we have Janet's dead. It would be pretty terrifying if someone your family thought was dead just walked into your home. It would be even more terrifying though if you were the only one who realized it. This Reddit user said, last night I was on the phone with my mom and she told me to come over for dinner. Everything was going great. Then suddenly she comes out with, Janet is going to be there. I was like, very funny mom, great one. But in my head I was thinking, that's really not funny. Why would you say something like that? Then my mom keeps going on with this. You haven't seen her in forever. It'll be nice. Janet died last year though. I have a vivid memory of it. I did not attend the funeral, but I remember everyone talking about it and making a scene of it because she died young. She died of cancer, and I remember her husband coming to visit and being very depressed. I never saw her body or anything, but I am 1000% certain this woman is dead, and I remember many family members talking about it. I never saw the body or visited her grave, and I wasn't that close with her, so I never had much grief over it. But I have vivid memories of her dying and my relatives being depressed over it. I was really weirded out by my mom on the phone, and finally I came out and said, Janet's dead, what are you talking about? And my mom just kept talking like it was ridiculous or like I was kidding around. She jokingly said, she's back, or something like that. I asked my dad later on and he looked at me like I was insane. I also can't find the obituary online, but I never looked for it to begin with.
At number 10, we have the rock skull. This is a story from Keith Ba on Reddit. He dived in an area called the Hollywood Bowl where there's cool scenery and a sunken toilet, but he found something strange when he ended up straying from the group. He strayed because his vest had slow leaks that meant he had to re-inflate. Anyways, he noticed a lionfish and began watching it before his attention shifted to a rock behind it. The rock kind of looked like a skull and it had the nose section and eye section, but he was called back to the boat before he could really check it out. He did snag a quick picture of the rock before heading back, but once he developed the picture, he saw that it actually was in fact a skull. Did his friends believe him at the time? Not really, but once they saw the picture, I guess they had to, and you can check out the photo for yourself. At number 9, we have the absent red octopus. On an unguided dive with her boyfriend, Reddit user Umbria had a trippy experience. The two divers took too long when they were looking around at a depth of 38 meters. Umbria herself started getting sleepy. They started to ascend when they saw a really cool red octopus with silvery eyes, and they had to stop and laugh at its funny face and take pictures for a bit, but that made them stay at the 38-meter depth. Staying down there leads to the boyfriend's computer freaking out and slowly bringing them back up, taking 3 spots to decompress along the way when they had only planned for 1. What happens is they reach the surface with less oxygen on reserve in their tanks than there should have been, and they begin to look for the pictures that they took at the Red Octopus because they were like, this is super cool. Thing is, they had over 20 photos of this same rock, but no octopus. At those depths, it's physically impossible to see red, let alone bright red, due to red light having the longest wavelength, so it's absorbed by water. What had happened was they spent too much time underwater and probably had nitrogen poisoning, and it's a similar state to drunkenness that, as the Reddit user says, makes you high and delirious until you pass out. They should have been tipped off that this was happening when Umbria herself was getting sleepy. If it weren't for their computer, who knows what would have happened. Could have passed out. At number 8, we have the sealed plane. This is one of many stories from Reddit user PIZZND, who I'll call Pizzend, and he used to be a deep sea diver with a large reputable company, or so he said. The team he was working with in this story I'm about to tell you were told to recover a military aircraft, so he sat at comms and logs to communicate and monitor the divers. They had been briefed on the situation, communication with the pilot was lost, and the team's job was to recover it so the military could investigate. The thing is, when the divers got to the plane, they found it completely intact, just resting on the bottom of the ocean. Pizzend said that the cockpit was still sealed, meaning the pilot did not eject. But there was no body and no sign of the pilot, even though it was completely sealed. After recovering the plane, the military took it, and Pizzend and his team never heard about it ever again. Kinda spooky. At number 7 is the locked fridge. Reddit user Count Dynamo saw something on a dive about 90 feet deep, or just under 30 meters, off of Vancouver Island in Canada, and had to notify the police. Count Dynamo said they saw a large deep freezer with a heavy industrial chain wrapped around it multiple times with about 5 cinder blocks attached. It was very, very rusted, and the deep freezer itself had to be 30 plus years old, probably more. Because one of the divers was friends with the local police, they were able to find out what was inside, and get this, the contents were 10 porcelain dolls, just wrapped and put in a deep freezer under the water. Why? No one knows. What do you think? Anyways, on to number 6, Shadow Shark. This is another story from our deep sea diving friend on Reddit, Pizzend, and he said he was installing rigging gear during a salvage job facing the boat when something smashed into the tank on his back. Several of his ribs bruised from this impact. When he turned around though, nothing was there. He reported this to the other diver that was with him and topside, and so they decided to go up. While keeping their eyes out on decompression stops, they spotted a large shadowy figure circling them. They had to wait to finish their decompression requirements because safety reasons, and during that time the shadowy figure got closer and closer. First, it became close enough that they could make out it was a shark. A massive one. As Pizzend said, he has never been afraid of sharks, but there's something about being circled by a massive shark in the middle of the ocean dangling from a chain that can instill a new phobia in the bravest men. Without a cage around them, the shark came nearly close enough to touch before the divers were lifted from the water. Pizzend said he didn't recognize the species as it was bigger than a great white shark with few gray features amongst entirely black coloration. I'm thinking maybe a basking shark that's really dark? But I don't know, those ones have funny mouths. Regardless, the team deduced that the shark is what hit him in the back as they were working below on the rigging gear. Anyways, on to number 5, no air in the deep. This one is from Reddit user Kimberto5. This diver on Reddit shared a story a dive master once told him that stuck with him. On a pretty deep dive, his dive master, or DM, found a full skeleton wearing diving gear with the air on the tank turned off. When they reported it to police, Kimberto5 said they found the full story. Apparently, the skeleton belonged to a man whose wife turned off his air while they were on a dive to murder him. Keeping this list going, let's move on to number 4, missile retrieval. Back again to Pizzend, the retired deep sea diver. Him and a dive buddy were tasked with retrieving missiles that were ejected from a military aircraft but had not detonated. They had the luck of crystal clear waters around them and had found the first missile on the ocean floor. Then his dive buddy let out a curse because he spotted a wall of sand 30 feet tall growing and approaching them. Pizzend said he hoped it was just the current sending the sand their way when it could have been something else. But anyways, the wall of sand hit them and their visibility was completely shot with complete darkness. He said he put his hand on his faceplate and couldn't see it. Like, that's right there. After that, the 2 divers heard a metallic scraping sound, still not able to see anything, and then the sand was gone. Crystal clear waters once again, but the missiles were gone. Not even feeling around under the sand led to a trace of them. Now the next one goes from tracing to retracing with number 3, stuck in a cave. Gordonta, or Gordon TA, on Reddit went diving in a cave with his buddy. They didn't lay down a line or anything to bring them back because they decided they were going to rely on a pipe they had seen on the floor of the cave as their backup, and they assumed it would lead them back out on this dive. Additionally, they thought they could follow the light at the end of the tunnel to help them, but two things. One, they went diving in the evening so the sun would go out, snuffing out their light at the end of the tunnel. And two, they assumed this pipe would lead them out, which was their biggest mistake. When they were 200 feet deep in the cave and decided to head back, it was silty and dark, so they did what they thought best and used the pipe to lead them. What it led them to was a dead end, a place in the cave they had never been to. Gordonta, or Gordon TA, said he will never forget making eye contact with his buddy as they both realized they were going to die. Lost, untethered, in a deep sea cave with little to no invisibility, they ended up crawling in search of the exit and were saved by a sign his buddy remembered seeing that warned divers of the dangers of cave diving, ironically, and then they both shot up to the surface. So they got lucky. Thank goodness. Okay, on to number 2, the Phantom Diver. Just to note that our last 2 are from our friend Pizzant on Reddit, the deep sea diver, as I've said many times, and this experience happened in the Bahamas on his first salvage job. He went down with a more experienced diver since it was his first go and they went just over 200 feet deep. He saw his dive buddy swim into the damaged portion of the ship, looking around, and he started asking if his buddy wanted him to tend to his air supply hose since it's dangerous to enter a sunken ship. It's like an umbilical cord and you don't want that getting bent or anything because that's your air. Anyways, his buddy said he didn't want to go into the ship and that he was on the other side, the port side. Pizzand reached out to grab what he thought was his disoriented friend before he realized there were no bubbles coming out of this thing's helmet. This thing wasn't breathing and it wasn't his friend. He backed away and reported that something else was down there to topside and he expected to be mocked, but the diving supervisor did the opposite. They left bottom and started heading back up. When Pizzand asked his supervisor about what happened, and the supervisor's message was cryptic back to him. He said he refused to put his divers in an exceptionally dangerous situations and then gave no clarification. Him and his team then declined to compete the salvage, so who knows what was down there. The last story at number 1, Pizzand said is hard to explain since he didn't know how he got to his position of looking up from the bottom of the ocean, staring up at the darkness above him, which is a creepy place to end up with no explanation. He said he realized he couldn't remember getting into the water or why he was there, he just couldn't move or control his body. Over the comms, I could hear Topside instructing the other diver to find me. How long had I been down here? How long had I been missing? The other diver told Topside that they grabbed him. I tried to shout out, but I couldn't even do that. After a few frantic minutes of communication between the diver and Topside, I noticed a shadow growing closer. It was moving towards me. Topside, I found him. The other diver reached down and grabbed my harness to drag me back to our dive stage, and as he pulled me, I rolled over and got a brief glance at my surroundings. I had been lying in a pile of human bones. Now, that's not an ideal picture when the explanation you heard from your disappearance when they grabbed him. Who's they? The skeletons? Did they grab Pizzand and then he couldn't remember? Kinda leaves a lot unexplained. And this is why I would never watch Pirates of the Caribbean.
Starting off this list at number 10, we have the author of the novel A Day in Hell. In this book, Matthew Botsford explains that after he accidentally walked into the middle of a shootout, he got shot in the head and died. He was resuscitated, but he was in a coma for 27 days afterwards. He explains a short time in hell as utter darkness that enveloped him as he was in thick black ink that poured over his eyes. He claimed that he was suspended in darkness, being blasted with hot air and having demonic eyes make their way towards him until some sort of divine entity grabbed him, telling him it wasn't his time.
Coming in number 9 is Army Dr. George Ritchie. He explains that in the 9 minutes he was dead, he was given a tour of hell by Jesus himself. I mean, what is Jesus doing in hell? Or maybe this isn't Jesus, maybe this is Jesus. Maybe this is Jesus in hell. Well, all around him he claims spirits were fighting each other to the death, kicking, biting, scratching, abuse, every single horrible act that could be imagined was taking place around him. And next up at number 8 is one aunt who died for a short time on the operating table. Well, she described the situation saying that she was lifted through the ceiling and into the sky. She ended up floating a few inches above a dirty brown, lifeless field, and across a dark void, she could see a lush green meadow. She suddenly felt something grabbing at her as if it was ripping flesh from her leg. She started withering to get out of the creature's grasp and saw her body on the operating table flailing around just before she was resurrected.
In at number 7, we have a professor who visited hell while he was unconscious prior to an emergency surgery. He says that during this time, he was being attacked by all sorts of vicious creatures, and when he tried to pray to protect himself, they only got angrier. He said that they screamed at him and that there was no God. He says that they spoke in the most obscene language, the worst blasphemy he has ever heard in his life. Coming in at the number 6 slot today, we got a hospice patient who came close to death. One of his workers said that his patient had a near-death experience one day and was terrified by what he saw. He says he saw what he thought was pain and fire, leading him to what he thinks was hell. Apparently, this man had no closure in his life and wasn't in touch with his family, so maybe this was a little bit of a wake-up call for him.
Halfway through, at number 5 is a Reddit user who has a very interesting interpretation of Satan.
This user claimed that he had OD'd 20 years ago. He died and saw Satan.
But what he saw wasn't what we normally envision, the devil as being, but rather he was a giant fire ant walking on lava.
Even he was confused why Satan would present himself as a fire ant, but I guess demons are gonna do what demons are gonna do.
Okay, if I'm the devil and I'm coming back as an animal, I am not coming back as one of the smallest animals ever.
I don't know, an ant that's on fire and it like crawls up your leg and gets in your shorts and stuff, maybe it goes in your urethra? That's bad.
Whoa, you took it to the next level.
I mean, that's hell. We're in hell, dude.
I'd come back as a dinosaur.
Yeah, a dinosaur would be
just a massive dinosaur, not the ones that eats only plants.
No. You want the carnivorous?
A meat eater.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you want.
I can't remember grade 3 science. Is that what it is? Carnivorous? The meat eater.
You have carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores. Boom.
Taking number 4 slot, we have somebody who explains hell as just like Earth, but dead. What does this mean? She says that after being hit by a car, she woke up in the same place where she was hit, except the sky was reddish orange, there was no animals, and the plants were dying or they were already dead. Is this real life right now? And the world smelled like rotten meat. Okay, so technically this one was a story on the non-sleep subreddit, but in my opinion, I feel like it seems like a pretty realistic version of what hell could be.
And at number 3 is a man who was momentarily killed in a bar fight. After being stabbed with a broken bottle, this man said that entering hell felt like passing through the open mouth of a volcano or burning lake. People who he knew had died were warning him not to come there, as there was no escape. All he could do was hear their crying and wailing of the souls that were trapped down there. After he came back to life, he decided to become a pastor to save the souls from going where he was headed.
Next up, number 2 is somebody who managed to crawl away from hell. I mean, I didn't know you can go to hell and come back. I thought it was a one-way ticket. Well, after suffering heart failure, he felt himself falling through Earth and landing just before a tall set of rusty gates, which had an aurora of being the gates of hell. Being too afraid to enter and knowing it wasn't his time, well, he managed to crawl back towards sunlight and back to life. Absolutely insane. I'm not sure if I believe it, but if it's a true story, remarkable.
And we're finishing off today's list with a Reddit user who drowned at 14.
This person claims that at the time they didn't entirely realize that they were dead.
They just felt like they were floating on the water. They said they saw somebody standing on the water who answered no when the user asked if they were God.
They told the user to keep floating, so they did. Eventually though, the cool water began heating up until it was boiling. They were paralyzed and forced to be in excruciating pain for what felt like years until the water cooled down again, only to start the process all over again.
Eventually the creature who the user spoke to earlier stopped and says, "Looks like someone's come for you, our playtime is over."
But maybe we will see each other again sometime. The user was then brought back to life by paramedics, the real life heroes.
Coming in at number 10, we have The Woman in the Cupboard, and this one is really strange, really odd. In 2000, a man in Japan became suspicious when food started disappearing from his apartment. So the man decided to set up cameras all around the place in the hope of catching whoever was doing this. When he got home the next day, he looked at the camera footage and he was very creeped out to see a woman walking around his house. He thought she was a burglar and she'd just come to steal some stuff when he was out, and so he rang the police. But when officers searched the place, they found a 58-year-old woman hiding in the top of a cupboard designed to store bedding and mattresses. What? This was just enough room for her to lie down, and she had been living in the cupboard the whole time, lying there perfectly still in the dark, just meters away from him, waiting for him to leave so she could use the house as if it were her own. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I think I'm going to do a quick check of every single cupboard in my house when I get home, and by quick I mean 10 hours. Next up at number 9 now, we have Armin Meiwes. This story is not really for those with a delicate stomach, so look away if that's you. In the early 2000s, Armin visited a little known website called the Cannibal Cafe. He posted a list looking for a well-built 18 to 25-year-old to be slaughtered and then consumed. His words, not mine. Yeah, normally young adults want good jobs, they want to travel, maybe find a partner and be slaughtered and then consumed, apparently. Amazingly, a few people actually replied and then backed out, presumably when they realized it was insane, but one man, Bernard Brandes, actually went to Armin's house. They then made a video of Armin cutting off his penis. He then tried to cook it and eat it, but it got burnt apparently, so he fed it to his dog. This happened. As Brandes bled to death in the bathtub, Armin gave him alcohol and 20 sleeping pills and then read a Star Trek book for 3 hours. He then kissed him and then killed him and then froze the flesh for 10 months while he lived off it and ground the bones into flour. Amazingly, he was only caught when he posted online the following year looking for his next meal and victim and bragged about what had happened before. He is now serving life in prison. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Silent Twins. Jennifer and June, the Gibbons twins from the UK, were known as the Silent Twins because they only ever talked to each other. Their sisterly love, and then there was this. The girls were absolutely obsessed with each other and gradually began to shun the community around them, who were not very welcoming to the girls. Eventually, they developed their own language and started communicating and committing crimes together, such as arson. This led them to be committed to a mental health institution for 14 years. June later said the whole thing went too far, and although we longed to be normal, we couldn't break out. It was too late, we were twins, but our personalities clashed. She wrote in her diary that her sister was a dark shadow, robbing her of sunlight. Now, psychologists deemed them deeply disturbed, and the girls felt so trapped, they said the only way that one of them could lead a normal life was if the other one died and freed them. The day after they were released from the institution, Jennifer died from a rare heart inflammation. June began to speak to others and went on to live a normal life for the first time. She wrote the epitaph on her sister's gravestone that read, "We once were two, we two made one. We no more two, through life be one. Rest in peace." Creepy. Coming at number 7, I'm Watching You. In 2015, a woman called Chelsea Clark from Toronto was watching movies in bed with her boyfriend. The next day, after work, she logged into her Facebook account and saw that she had a message from someone she didn't know. Now, Chelsea thought this was quite strange because her settings didn't allow messages from strangers. The message was titled, "Really Cute Couple." Chelsea opened it to find a guy with his profile picture as the Joker had sent pictures of her and her boyfriend in bed the night before to her. The account was deleted soon after, and police investigations have made no leads at the moment. So, next time you're watching something on your laptop, guys, maybe your tablet or your phone at night, someone could be watching right back at you. Next up at number 6, the Cemetery Clown. In 2015, Julie Graham and her husband were driving past Rose Hill Cemetery at night when they spotted a figure climbing over the cemetery gate. They captured this picture, but it wasn't until they looped back around that they realized it was a clown. They tried to get a bit closer for a better look, and that's when they saw him standing alone in the middle of the gravestones, slowly waving at them. And yes, that is the creepiest looking wave of all time. He didn't seem scared or bothered by them at all, but before the couple could even understand what was going on, the clown slowly turned around and walked into the darkness of the cemetery. Now, when police investigated all of this the next day, they found no signs of vandalism or disturbance in the graveyard, leading many people to wonder what the cemetery clown was doing that night and if he's going to be seen again. Coming at number 5 now, we have The Children. In the 90s, respected journalist Brian Bethel shared a story that changed his and many others' opinions on the paranormal. One evening, Brian said he was parked outside of a local movie theater and filling out a check for someone. Then he looked up to see 2 boys standing next to the car in the darkness, no more than 10 10 or 12 years old. Now before they even spoke, Brian said he was gripped with fear. He couldn't explain why, and that it was just incomprehensible and soul-racking. Only one of the boys spoke, and they said they wanted to see a movie, but they had left their money at home and asked if Brian could give them a ride back to get their money. Now Brian avoided looking at them because of the fear and instead looked up to see that the last show had already started and there was no way they'd make it back in time. The boy said it wouldn't take long. He said they were just two little kids. He said they didn't have a gun or anything. Now that last sentence scared Brian the most, and as the feeling of terror consumed him, he realized his hand was already moving to unlock the door. That's when he looked up to see their eyes. They were deep, coal black. Brian quickly made his excuses, but as he tried to drive away, the kid started banging on the window and said,
"We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in."
Okay, at number 4, we have Robert the doll. Now this doll was given to a boy, Eugene Otto, in 1904 by a Jamaican woman who worked with the family, who was supposedly a practicer of black magic and voodoo. She had supposedly cursed the doll because she was unhappy with how the family had treated her, and they soon reported hearing conversations between Eugene and Robert the doll. At night, his parents would hear Eugene scream, and when they ran into the bedroom, they would find the furniture around Robert had been thrown around. When the family left to go on trips, the neighbors reported seeing Robert move from window to window of the house, and they would sometimes hear the doll let out a terrifying cackle. Over time, the house was sold on to a new family, but the doll remained there. The new owner, a 10-year-old girl, also screamed in the night and claimed that Robert would move, and that one time he even tried to attack her. These days, he sits in the Fort East Martello Museum in Florida and was the inspiration for the horror movie Child's Play. Moving on to number 3 now, we have Murder Castle. In 1886, pharmacist H.H. Holmes bought a number of properties in Chicago that left him owning an entire city block. He began renovating them into a hotel. He would hire some workers for one part and others for a different area, so nobody really knew the full extent of the hotel's layout. It was finished just in time for the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, where people from all over the world descended on the city. But this wasn't a normal hotel. Almost every part of it was some sort of torture chamber. For most of that year, he trapped unsuspecting guests in their rooms to kill them. There were gas chambers and also rooms to suffocate people or starve them to death, as well as a hanging room. I'm not even sure what a hanging room means, but sounds pretty nasty. The whole building was designed to confuse the victims and give them a false sense of hope. There were staircases that led to absolutely nowhere and doors that were totally bricked off. Once they were dead, Holmes disposed of the bodies through a specially designed chute to dump them into the basement and then incinerate them in huge furnaces. He is known as America's first serial killer. Moving on to number 2, we have the real Leatherface. This is the story that inspired the movies Psycho, Silence of the Lambs. So, what real life story could produce such horror? It's the story of Ed Gein. This man had a disturbed obsession with his own mother, who had raised him during the earlier 20th century, with strict religious teachings about the sins of lust and desire. Now after she died in 1945, Ed began to spiral into the life of a serial killer. At first, he would dig up bodies of recently buried females and cut off their body parts to keep as trophies before placing them back in the graves. Then he stepped up and began a killing spree before police finally caught him. When they discovered the dismembered body of a woman in his farmhouse shed, investigators were also horrified by what else they found. A freshly cooked human heart was on the stove, ready to be eaten. He'd made drinking bowls out of their skulls, and the creepiest thing, I think, was what he had done with his victims' skin. He used them to make furniture, face masks, and women's clothes out of women's skin. I know the horror movie classics were inspired by this, but yeah, they can't really touch on how creepy this really was. And finally at number 1, we have the death of Elisa Lam. Elisa was a 21-year-old Canadian woman who was visiting LA in 2013. She stayed at the Cecil Hotel in downtown LA and had been calling her parents every single day on her visit, but then on January 31st, the calls suddenly stopped and her worried parents reported her missing to the police. She seemed to have just vanished at out of nowhere. Then on February 14th, the police released this video of her behaving very erratically in the hotel elevator. She seemed to exit and then re-enter, and then started making some sort of gesture to something in the hallway outside. At one point, she simply crouches as if to hide from whatever is out there. Eventually, guests of the hotel started complaining about the water, saying it was black, foul tasting, and had low pressure. Now, when staff went to investigate the water tank on the roof of the hotel, they found Elisa Lam's decomposing body. That's why the water was black. Oh god. The police don't know how she got onto the roof, which was locked and alarmed, or how she got into the tank and then replaced the lid from the inside, or what was going on in that elevator. Something really creepy. Some people think that this all points to a murder, others say it was supernatural in nature, that Elisa was actually possessed. Millions of people have now watched the infamous elevator video, and many people say something about it is very, very disturbing. Will it ever be solved? Starting off at number 10 now, we have Leave. This one comes from a Reddit user who owes his life to a stranger or some supernatural force. See what you guys think. They say, I was stationed in Seoul, South Korea several years ago. I was taking a shower in my room, and when I got out, the word leave was written in small letters in the fog on the bathroom mirror. I don't have a roommate because we get our own private rooms there. A little freaked out, I decided to do exactly that. I left. I went off for some Korean barbecue and wandered the city a bit. I came back a couple of hours later to find the barracks were evacuated and half burnt to the ground. The fire was pinpointed to faulty electrical wiring that caught some insulation on fire inside the walls. Someone or something knew that was going to happen, and to this day, whatever that something was, it didn't want me in the middle of it. I gladly thank who or whatever it is if they give me the chance, but it's been years and I still have no idea. Moving on to number 9 now, we have The Figure. When you're a kid and you get creeped out at night, your parents may tell you it's just your imagination. But what if you found out that you were right the whole time? Reddit user Miss Awesomeness said, when I was a kid between 8 or 9, I used to wake up every night to headlights coming through my bedroom window. The lights would then stop and turn off, not as if a car drove by, but as if they were turned off. Then the long shadows of a man, as if he were looking through my window, would pass by and stop right in front of the window. I would lay really still and pretend nothing happened every night for months. Eventually I convinced myself it was my imagination. Now that I think back, it stopped when my stepdad moved in, but I was convinced it wasn't real. Across the street lived my best friend, whose mom was also single, and she refused to sleep in her bedroom. Her window faced my window. She told me years later it was because every night a man would park on her side yard and walk over to my yard. The long shadows were from the light in her yard. She eventually decided it was my dad checking in on us and never told me until I was a teenager. It wasn't my dad, I know that because I asked him, so I thought I was crazy and hallucinating for years, or perhaps I wasn't and two kids were having odd dreams at the same time every night. Coming out number 8 now, we have The Room. This one comes from a Reddit user who said, I work in hospice, I spend a lot of time around dying people. About a month and a half ago, one of my longer term clients was actively passing. Now that can involve hallucinating, seeing and talking to people who aren't actually there. It happens a lot. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the dying person's brain trying to grasp with their new reality. So I work overnights. My client was wide awake, talking to people who were in the room with her but who weren't in the room with me, which was fine. I'm okay with that. Until she started describing people I knew who had passed. I almost quit my job that night and told myself I wouldn't return to her. Most of the rest of her hospice care team started quitting in the next few days, and I ended up staying with her until the very end. That one weird night was the only time she was talking to my dead family members. I'm still kind of messed up over it. Next up, number 7 now, we have The Creature. Do you guys believe in Bigfoot? We've talked about that a lot in urban legend videos. Is this story related to that? Reddit user The Glitter Band said, I get insomnia. It was one of those nights and I was sitting out on my back porch at about 4 AM smoking a cigarette. It was one of these eerie nights where there is absolutely no breeze and it's just completely quiet out. We have woods behind our house, and as I was sitting there, I see this person making his way through the canopy of the trees, like jumping from tree to tree, 30 or 40 feet up in the air. I was absolutely stunned and just sat there, dumbly too afraid and confused to even get up. and run inside the house. This person or thing or whatever it was stopped directly behind my house and looked at me. At this point it's about 50 feet away and maybe 40 feet up in the air. It pauses for about 5 seconds staring in my direction. I'm absolutely certain that it wasn't an animal. Its body was human shaped and it definitely wasn't a raccoon, bear or any of the other things people might have suggested it was. But the way it was moving through the trees definitely was not human. No human, I don't care how fit they are, could move like that. It was too dark to make out that much detail of the face, clothing or anything like that. After about 5 seconds of looking at me, it turns away and takes off the same way it had been going before, just leaping from tree to tree at a fast pace. Within a few more seconds, it was out of sight. Moving on to number 6 now, we have true or false. This one comes from Reddit user the ambush bug. I'm going to jump right into it and we'll discuss it after. They said, in 4th or 5th grade, we stopped all of our classes for the day. 2 people came into our classroom, a man and a woman, and they didn't say why they were there or where they had come from. They handed out questionnaire booklets that seemed like standardized tests, except for the questions within them. 50 or so questions, all of them true or false format, but with really weird content. Some that I can remember were true or false, worms talk to trucks, and true or false, apples are blue. We all answered them while looking really confused, and our teachers were silent the entire time. The next day, nobody said a word about the test. I remember asking people what they were, but nobody could recall where the people were from. We never saw them again, and no faculty of the school ever once mentioned a test. We didn't have them the next year and had never had them before. I still have no clue what they wanted from us. Alright, what is going on there, guys? That sounds like something out of a movie. Like some sort of creepy CIA stuff. Moving on to number 5 now, we have teleportation. Do you guys believe that teleportation can happen? This story makes it sound like you just have to believe really hard to make it happen. Reddit user Evangelina1021 said, I always remember this and do not have an explanation for it. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and walking to the stairs. I remember closing my eyes for a second at the top of the stairs, and when I opened them, I would be at the bottom of the stairs. I would run upstairs and close my eyes and the same thing would happen again. It happened at least 4 or 5 times until my parents called me to go to bed because they could hear me run up the stairs. It's weird because I was totally wide awake and do not have a history with sleepwalking. I still think about it and wonder how that was possible. Next up at number 4 now, we have the boats. This one comes from Reddit user Risa, and if you can solve this mystery, guys, there's a massive monetary reward for you at the end of it. I'm serious, you're about to see why. They said, my uncle never had a chance to meet him, hired a small yacht with a small group of friends and were going to use it to do sailing holidays as a business. Anyway, they radioed in very early one morning saying they were out of petrol off the coast and were told they would receive petrol in the morning. They went to deliver petrol and never found the boat. They have only ever found one life donut ring and that's it. They think the boat was pirated and we have reports that they're still alive in different countries, but they've never been substantiated. They also have a sneaking suspicion that the yacht owner had something to do with it as he acted so dodgy after it all went down. They literally have absolutely no idea what happened. There were no other ships in the area at the time. They thought they could have been run over and sank by a larger ship. Anyway, it's called the Patanela. There is still a huge reward out for any info. Coming in number 3 now, we have pizza time. This one comes from Reddit user Math the username, who said, I was 18 and my brother Chris was 16. I also have a brother James who was 5 at the time. We had just moved into an older house that used to be 3 apartments. We just about finished unpacking and we designated rooms. James's room was directly above the living room with a staircase. James went up to discover his new room and Chris and I took a short walk around the neighborhood. We got back and were sitting in the living room just talking. My mom says she's going to get pizza for dinner and leaves. She took a fairly long time, which is normal for her. I think she really enjoys the small breaks she gets when she can leave the house without James, and I never object to babysitting. Besides, James is plenty occupied with his new room. Chris and I are just talking in the living room. James is super excited about his new room. We hear him running and stomping around upstairs, opening and closing doors. Sometimes he slams the doors pretty hard, but whatever, he's a kid. I assumed he fell asleep since the noise stopped eventually. I hear my mom's car pull up. I get up to meet her in the kitchen. My mom comes in carrying soda. James follows directly behind her carrying the food, yelling pizza time. She took him with her to get dinner. Chris and I just looked at each other, taking way too long to comprehend what was happening and what was making that noise upstairs. Next up at number 2 now, we have John. This one is just straight up creepy. If they are telling the truth about the details of this story, then I have no idea what the explanation is. Reddit user CatGib13 said, when my son was about 2 or 3, he wouldn't go to sleep, so I let him in my bed. My husband was asleep, so I told my boy he had to look at his books quietly when I read mine. He was good for a bit, but then he started reading the book, actually reading the words out loud, slowly. Now he couldn't read, and it was never a book we had read to him yet. It wasn't memorization. I asked him how he knew what it said, and he replied, my friend John is telling me. He talked to John whenever he played. He divided his Matchbox cars into 2 piles and talked to his friend. He also claimed he lived in his nursery closet. At age 4, we moved him into his big boy room, and now that he's 16, he refuses to even step into the nursery. He hasn't been in there since we moved him out. When I asked why, he says he doesn't know, but it gives him the creeps and the hairs on his arm stand up even thinking about it. That doesn't bother anyone else. I don't actually know what the explanation for that story is. Maybe the kid could read better than they thought, or maybe the spirit of a dead man called John was reading out loud to him at night. I hope it's the first one. And finally, number 1 now, we have Ernie. Do any of you guys have those toys that talk when you press a button on them or move in front of them? Did you ever think they could be creepy? Well, you're about to, after this story from Reddit user LXNXB. They said, when I was a kid, I had lots and lots of plushies. One of them was a talking Ernie doll from Sesame Street that wasn't functioning properly. You had to absolutely bang it on a table for it to say, I feel great. Our old house in my home country was housed with spirits, but not bad ones, or at least that's what my parents said. I never witnessed or felt anything until this one time. When I was 8, I overheard my parents saying something along the lines that my Ernie plushie spoke every time they talked about my grandma. I got irrationally scared, which made my parents hide Ernie in a huge box along with my other unused plushies. One time, when I was playing hide and seek, I was hiding with my childhood friend Jay in our spare room where the box of plushies were. While we were hiding, I figured I might as well tell him the story about the haunted Ernie doll and my just recently passed away grandma. In the middle of the story, we hear Ernie say, I feel great, in the box on top of the shelf. There's no way that was moved, and even if it was somehow moved by gravity, you need to bang Ernie on the table to even make it talk. We screamed and ran outside.